Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Brian, can you hear me all right?
Yes. We're 15 seconds from start. 4, 3, 2, 1. Oop.
Of May 19th, 2020. This is a virtual meeting, and this meeting is now called to order. The first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Paulson and seconded by Mr. Hyatt.
Certain.
Is there any discussion of the agenda? Hearing none.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask that we would pull item number 10 for just some questions that I have.
Okay. And we will make that then action item 5. Any other comments about the agenda? Nope. All in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. Next, we have the superintendent update from Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Mrs. Roy. Just a couple of brief updates for the board this evening. We have scheduled our next town hall meeting for the evening of May 28th. We are still working out the final details, but May 28th, we'll have kind of a different panel in place for that meeting to talk about summer and also about virtual options and to be able to answer those questions because we are starting to receive some questions with parents about what virtual options might be available for next school year. So plan for that and we'll get that word out and get the details out. We're just trying to work out those logistics with Channel 12. So we should have that released in the next probably 24 hours or so. The next topic that we released today was on our graduation ceremonies. Of course, we've been working to try to see what we could pull off for our students all along. My goal has been to get our students to walk across the stage. We actually have the opportunity for our students to have 2 ceremonies of sorts. As you know, CBS 4, as well as some very generous sponsors, are doing a virtual graduation for each school separately that will start on the 29th of May. And the schools pick their days when they could run their virtual ceremony. But this will be the opportunity for address from the principal, the student speakers that normally speak, those types of things, where you'll be able to hear them really well, but also be able to focus on them for that part of the ceremony. And then they'll be running all the pictures of all of the graduates and their names along on those virtual ceremonies. And then as we released today, the opportunity for the students to walk across the stage. We had a district team working for a long time to come up with an option that we felt like would work to maintain that social distancing. And as we know, things are changing every day and requirements are changing every day. But maintaining social distancing both for families and spectators, but also the students themselves as part of the ceremony, but also recognizing that many of these students have not seen each other in a couple of months. trying to maintain social distancing with teenagers could be a little problematic, with them, just being excited to see each other, and we understand that. And so we released today that we would be doing the walking across the stage part of graduation in their ceremony at the Gainesville Raceway. They offered that to us when we reached out, and they were willing to do that for us. We've had a team working on that and planning that for our graduates, where they will be able to proceed and have a processional in their car. We will have the pomp and circumstance. They will have the opportunity to decorate their cars and then get out of their cars and walk across the stage to receive their diploma from their principal. So that opportunity will be for all of our graduates. So they'll all be able to do that. We felt like this was a great option that would meet the needs of all of our graduates, but also maintaining a consistent opportunity for all of our graduates. So no one would miss out on any type of opportunity. So we're excited to put those in place. We have published that schedule. Our principals are excited, and our students are starting to pick up their caps and gowns now. So I think it's reality is setting in, that graduation is finally here for these students. We are doing some other recognitions that we don't normally do for our graduates. So they're having multiple opportunities for that. As some people have seen on social media, SWI Photo created the banners of all of their senior pictures and hung them in front of their studio. But we've also, SWI was very generous to provide banners for us, and our facilities team made some stands for those. And so we've got all of our graduates from Alachua County Public Schools proudly displayed out in front of the district office. So if you're driving around town, you can see those right in front. You can't miss them. And we also, thanks to some generous sponsors within our community, will have an expanded edition of the Gainesville Sun Graduation Edition. They do one of those every year, but normally it's just either the top 10 graduates at a school or the valedictorian and salutatorian pictures. But in this case, every senior is going to be recognized in this very special edition on June 7th. So Sunday, June 7th, that edition will come out in the paper. That's going to be extra special just because every student will be able to be recognized in that edition of the Gainesville Sun. So be on the lookout for that on June 7th. And finally, last week we released information where we had received our bond rating, which we were very proud of because of, you always want to make sure that others, outsiders view the district in a strong financial position. And so I've asked Alex if I could cede a little bit of my time over to Alex just to give you a brief update on that rating, because we also participated in bond sale today. So Alex has a very brief update for the board. If I could cede a little of my time to Mr. Rella.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Superintendent Clark. As Karen mentioned, it's been an extremely busy month, I would say, surrounding our bond financing for the Big Four. If you recall, we met on April 21st to have the board approve the authorizing resolution. And, at the time, we weren't sure which direction we were going to go. Obviously, the market at that time was extremely volatile, but we were starting to see some signs that things were kind of starting to stabilize. So we did request and have approved an option to go with a direct placement with a bank or to go with a public offer bond. And when we talked at that meeting, I kind of explained you're going to get better pricing typically on the publicly offered bond. So we really wanted to go that direction if we could. We met with Moody's and Standard & Poor's and did a ratings presentation a couple weeks ago. And I believe we shared some of those results with the board, but it was a really thorough presentation, essentially, kind of obviously going through the financial aspects of the district, but then also kind of familiarizing them with Alachua County. I mean, if you're a bond guy in New York City, you probably have never heard of Alachua County unless you went to UF, but you probably heard of University of Florida. And so we did a really good job, Karen and myself, of kind of outlining the financial pieces that are great, but then also some of the bragging points with the academics, and then also, what we have going on in the local economy. And, some districts kind of choose not to go through that ratings process. And, we felt it was really important to do that. Although it was a lot of work, it gets them really familiar with what we're doing. We have seen, based on the COVID-19 pandemic, a handful of districts get their bond rating downgraded. We're able to avoid that. They, in the report, obviously talked a lot about the financial strength of the district, but then also the management practices how we operate as a district and how that's beneficial, not just for our current state, but our ability to get through the COVID-19 on a financial basis. So we did avoid the downgrade, which is really important. It was a huge win for us. So we're pretty excited about that. From there, we kind of kept the eye on the market. We actually had a couple deals that went through last week with Broward schools, Hillsborough schools, and Palm Beach with really big deals. And they kind of helped us prove the market, if you will, because at that point, there was no public offered bonds in Florida since the pandemic really started in mid-March. So we felt pretty comfortable when we kind of looked at it. And I just had to look this up the other day, but this bond at 110 million is actually the largest in district history. So it was a really big deal for us. We wanted to make sure we price at the right time. And we kind of pulled the trigger last week. Felt like today was the day based on what other districts are doing in terms of pricing. So it was a really exciting day. And, we got to look and watch, and what we had originally planned to do is bring the whole Finance Academy down to Tampa to, walk them through this process and allow them to really watch a bond price out on the floor at a trading desk. Fortunately, we kind of weren't able to do that, but Karen and myself got to watch it and watch people and large, mutual funds buy a piece of Alachua County's debt, which was really neat. So at the end of the day, we actually ended up with an interest rate, true interest cost of 1.46%, which is truly amazing. I think it really honestly exceeded any expectation that I had. A couple of notes on that. We actually, Broward, Palm Beach, and Hillsborough all went last week, and we actually ended up with a better rate than all three of them. I like to think that we went against the big dogs, and we kind of won that fight. I also sent the board, and I apologize for it being late because we've been kind of working through the process this afternoon, but a summary of this rate for our COPS 2020 series as it compares to all of our current outstanding issues. And it should be in your inbox. Again, I apologize for the lateness of that, but you can see from that our issues in terms of interest rate range from about 5% down to 3%. So we're really 1.5% less than our lowest interest cost issue. So obviously, we're going to proceed to closing. We're really excited about it. We'll have cash in hand and, at the end of next week. And that's really the deadline I gave our folks. We need to have cash in hand. We need to be ready to roll because we got the big four, coming up for demolition and building in the next month. So we should be kind of ready to go on the financing end. And I just feel like in these uncertain times, it's really important to kind of celebrate the victories. And, for this board, for this community is a huge deal. We secured financing, largest bond ever at the lowest interest rate I've been able to find going back 20 years. And the reality of it, with the borrowing cost being so low, it's going to allow us to really stretch our half-cent tax dollars to do more for the kids. So we're really excited about that. So I just wanted to give you that update.
Wow, that is so exciting, Mr. Rella. Thank you. Mrs. Clark, did you have anything else to announce before we go to consent agenda?
No, I think we'll end with that. Alex had it was an exciting day in the finance world. So it was a great process to watch. But as Alex mentioned, it looked like we timed that right and we're able to secure that financing to get these projects rolling with the cash flow. So I'm done. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Clark, yes.
I have questions for Mrs. Clark.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Karen, Mrs. Clark. I have a question about the wonderful graduation that the district is planning for all of the seniors. I talked with Mrs. Johnson today and then Mrs. Wise as well, and they fully elaborated on some things that you're doing even for us. However, I'm worried a little bit about the extended families, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. And I have recommended because there's never anything certain with Channel 12. We could be bumped by county, we could be bumped by city, but we certainly need some type of live presentation for the extended members of families. And I know as a grandparent, I would certainly want to see that live. So I'm just wondering, what can you do now that we've got a tax thing just came through really strong, we have extra money. What can we do in order to purchase? I'm not trusting Channel 12, but we need our own channel of some sort to put this over in an excellent manner.
Right. Well, two questions you've raised there. The curriculum department is actually working on that right now. Either very similar to how people watch the board meetings, like on our YouTube channel live, or even through Facebook Live. We would be able to do that on our own time schedule. So we would not be relying on anybody's time schedule at that point.
Well, they told me, Ms. Clark, they weren't sure if you were doing Facebook Live, especially with the school like Buchholz with 400 or 500 graduates. It's pretty hard to tie up Facebook at that length of time.
Right. Well, it is hard to tie up Facebook on one hand, but we aren't limited in the time with that. And so we are going to be, we talked late this afternoon, and we're going to be able to do that. So it's just a matter of which is better. Is it better to do it on the YouTube Live or on the Facebook Live? So we'll have our media staff, our guys that record the board meetings and that crew, look at which is going to be a better option. So we are going to have some type of live streaming for that event. And then when you mentioned the channel, I know that Ms. Johnson has been working with Cox Communications as of right now, and Jackie can chime in if I don't say this correctly. Right now, there are only 2 government channels on our channel feed or lineup. I don't know what the correct word is. One of which is held by the city of Newberry, and one with the county. So, and we're not allowed to buy into that. So there's not a way for us to do that part. But so we asked about, and I know Jackie is continuing those communications with the local Cox team of, is there an option of another channel? Like, is there a vacant channel that they could designate as a governmental channel? So they are continuing to work on that. But we can't buy space on Channel 12. They're not allowed actually to accept money for that. So that we actually investigated to see if we could buy space, like a commercial space where we could spend the money. But as of right now, that is not allowable. So I know that Jackie has been just this week still having those communications with them to see how can we do something so we are not at the mercy of other agencies right now.
Can I add something to you, Ms. Clark? Excuse me, Dr. McNeely. Can I add something on that? When I worked at the city of Gainesville and the franchise agreement was up for renegotiation once when I was there, Cox has to provide at least 3 public access channels.
Okay.
And so if there are only 2 that are being used, it seems like there should be 1 more. And I think I mentioned that to you when we first started with the pandemic. So hopefully that option can be explored. If I haven't, excuse me, I haven't found looked for the franchise agreement lately, but I do recall that being in the agreement with the city of Gainesville. So I don't know how that would apply with us here with the school district or whatever, but I will tomorrow try to find the most recent Cox franchise agreement between the city of Gainesville and see.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jackie is available that she can hop on because there she is. Maybe she can answer that question for it, because I know she's been the one that's been in direct communication with Cox.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Clark. Yes, I did speak with a representative from Cox, and what they tell me now is that those agreements actually go through the state. There is no longer an agreement directly with the localities, and that under the current contract, they are required to provide 2 channels. So what they are looking at is there a possibility of us, is there a channel, and if there is another channel that we could purchase, what would that entail? So they were going to explore that and get back with me.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Clark, may I ask one more thing?
Of course.
Some of us don't get Channel 12.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how many people that would affect, but, you know,
Right. Well, Channel 12 also you can watch on the computer. You can stream it on the computer as well. I've never done that personally because I get Channel 12, but I know that that is an option too.
that's what I tried to do at the last town hall. And of course, we couldn't do it. But
Right. But of course, if we're bumped, you can be bumped from either one or both, depending on what the city or county is doing. And so like with the town hall, we were bumped off one, but not the other. So there's two venues for that. But you're right. If someone is not on Cox Communications for cable, it may be that they can't get Channel 12 on the TV.
Mrs.
Madam
Clark,
Chair.
for the record, and I'm so glad Mrs. Johnson chimed in. But for the past 3 years, I have been asking, not just because it's a graduation time, but because of the bumps that we get sometimes when we're trying to have board meetings and for the public. I really want you and Mrs. Johnson and Alex to pursue whatever it takes so that our agency can be just as well versed and seen as the county and the city. I think our agency is more important, and I'd say that to both chairs, for the city as well as the county, as far as what we need to offer our parents and the community. So I really want that to be in the record. I'm asking once again for the pursuit of our own channel.
Yes, ma'am. We're continuing to have those conversations and we are pursuing. So we will continue to keep you all updated as to any progress that we make with them.
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Hyatt.
I wanted to say, I think Dr. McNeely brings up a really, really good point about, extended family. And I'm glad the district is looking at that through YouTube and or Facebook Live. And I know that channels that I have seen that other school districts have, and I imagine there are a whole lot more than I've seen, but I've seen Miami-Dade County, Polk County, Pinellas County, and I'm sure there are more, but it might be good to contact some folks from those counties and see how they have an agreement. What does that work? I know we're a lot smaller market and a lot smaller budget, but I think if we could look into to see how that's done, it might help us get accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. All right, if there's no more discussion, we'll go to the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, can I interrupt real quick? Sorry, can we give the ways that people can provide public input during the meeting?
Of course. I'm
the action
sorry, I
items.
could have called on you.
It wasn't on the agenda. So the ways that we provided to provide public input during this meeting included the emails to issues@gm.sbac.edu. We did receive one that will test my ability to read in 3 minutes again, but I think I can do it. And that's general issues, citizen input for the end of the meeting. I do know that we have at least one speaker card downstairs. So somebody will be joining. I believe that is for regular citizen input as well. I will try to confirm. And then I've got the phone numbers up on the screen. Now, if you would like to comment on an action item before, you need to call in before it comes up on the agenda. The action item phone number is 955-7613. And then if you just want to provide citizen input to the board, that comes after the action item agendas, action items are finished. And that number is 955-7544. There is somebody live answering the phone. So if it just rings or you get voicemail, just try again. That just means they're helping somebody else. When you do call, you're placed on hold. So you can't really listen to the meeting this way. You're in a waiting room listening to hold music. So if you're watching on YouTube or channel 12, there might be a delay. So just be prepared that we'll be calling you in But the music will stop and you'll be part of the meeting at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. And now we're at the consent agenda, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recommend that the school board approve the consent agenda as presented, items 1 through 9.
So move.
Been moved by Mr. Hyatt,
Second.
seconded by Dr. McNeely. Any comments? Hearing none on all in favor then of the consent agenda? 1 through 9. Opposed? And the motion passes 5-0 for the consent agenda. All right, we are now at the action items. The first action item is employee case 201920-9036-37. Mr. Purvis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For employee case 2019-20-9036-37, the superintendent recommends that the employee be suspended without pay beginning May 20th, 2020.
Is there a motion to approve this?
So move.
It's been moved and
Second.
Is there a second?
Certain seconded.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Certain. It's been moved by Mr. Hyatt, seconded by Mrs. Certain. Any discussion first from the public? Any citizen input on that?
No, Madam Chair, there's nobody here to speak on this item.
Okay, any board member discussion? Hearing none, all in favor then? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I do have a question. Mr. Purvis said suspension. I thought this said termination. My form says termination.
No, ma'am, this was a suspension without pay beginning May 20th, 2020.
Can I just call out the case number to make sure I have the right piece of paper?
Yes, ma'am.
2019-20-9036-37. And it says this employee has been recommended for termination of her employment. That's what it says on my cover. I'm sorry. I mean, the vote would be the vote, but I was just, this is what I have in my packet. That's why I was asking.
I apologize. It must have the wrong one attached because the one that was supposed to be attached
It's from the April.
talks about finding probable cause for disciplinary action for a violation of board policy, and it's just talking about suspension without pay.
Actually, Ms. Certain, I could answer that. Back on the April 7th board meeting that we canceled, this was the original, the paper you're looking at, I believe, is the original one, because at that time, I believe the recommendation was
Correct.
termination. Since that time, there's been some further developments on the legal side.
Okay.
And so there's been some, and so that's why the recommendation changed on that same case number. So I
Okay.
guess
Thank
that
you,
was,
Ms.
I mean, it's just like what he read didn't line up with what I.
right,
what
I understand.
Okay.
I understand,
All
but that's what happened.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and if there's no further discussion, the all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. All right, the next action item is the instructional materials for career tech education and advanced placement. Mrs. Wise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, we held our public hearing for these materials on May 5th, and I'm asking tonight for board approval on the adoption of the recommendations from our Instructional Materials Committee for the Career and Technical Education and Advanced Placement Instructional Materials.
Thank you, Ms. Wise. Is there motion to approve?
So move.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Certain. Is
No,
there
I
a
think that's
second?
Dr. McNeely. I second it. I think that was.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see Dr. McNeely. It's moved by Dr. McNeely, seconded by Ms. Certain. Is there any discussion from the public? Mr. Moore?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, any discussion from the board? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. Third action item is the amendment to board policies. Oh, this is the long one. Student progression plan and codes of student conduct. Is there, well, let me give that to, who is it? Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we spelled it out into 4 parts, but it'll be all one motion. This is the time of year, every year, where we update the student progression plan for next year, as well as the elementary and secondary codes of conduct. The discipline committee meets monthly throughout the year and makes some recommendations to the superintendent, which are then brought forward. And the progression plan is updated based on, mostly based on statutory changes that are made, that our curriculum department implements into the plan. And then they are incorporated into the policies we have. That's why it's done kind of in this more extended process. So the superintendent recommends that the board approve the proposed amendments to the 2020-2021 codes of student conduct for both elementary and secondary, the 2020-2021 student progression plan, and proposed amendments to policies 5410 and 5500 set forth in the attached documents for advertising, and schedule a public hearing on June 16, 2020 at 6:30 p.m.
So move.
It's been moved by Mr. Hyatt,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Certain. Any discussion from the public? Mr. Moore?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, any discussion from the board on these policies? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. Next, we are at the strategic priorities. Mrs. Johnson has sent us all a notice, and she's going to present that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Roy. I shared with the board on May 12th a list of the strategic priorities from 2019-20. These priorities, of course, are intended to help drive the district's budgeting process. You can see them there before you. We did have some input before our deadline from Dr. Paulson. He requested that renewing the 1 mil be the top priority for 2020-21. Also stated that he felt that the safe and more securities facility should remain among the priorities, and that the existing priority regarding salaries for teachers and ESPs remain in place, and that the number of priorities be limited to 5 or 6.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir, Dr. Paulson.
What- I still want the salaries. What I said was we'd have to look at the salaries for the teachers because of the way they have it categorical. You know, we could leave it like remain in the upper 2/3 because that's the highest it's been in 40 years, or some other way. But I don't want the teachers left out. And the did you say for the ESPs? I thought we should go to $12 an hour, and then along with the salary insurance increase will be up around $15.50 an hour together. For ESP, then it's 2016 hours or year round. Does that make sense? In other words, we won't know what's going to happen when we get our money from the state. Presently, there's over 4.9 million. 80% of that money will go to raise the minimum wage. Then the other 20% will be used to raise the salaries. Now, I don't know what we could be doing with that. If we say, you know, continue to be in the top 2/3 of the state, would that still be a goal? Because that's something we've never been before. And then the ESPs are $11.57 an hour plus the 347 or whatever. It's $15.04 together with the health insurance. It'll be up. If we go to 12, that'll make us go in 5 years from $9.29 to $12 and continue. Eventually, we hope to get to $15, but I'm sure I won't be here, but I'd like to be up around 13 when I leave. So that's what I wrote for. And of course, safe and secure schools. And the 1 mil, that's, without that, we can't survive. Anyway, thank you for letting me talk, Jackie.
Mrs.
And Madam Chair, before we get to board discussion, we do have a caller that would like to speak to this action item. So I know we're doing citizen input first.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if Ms. Johnson had finished.
Mrs. Johnson, before Attorney Moore goes to the citizen, I just want to say that no, I did not turn in anything to you prior to this meeting, but I have a lot of comments and I thought that you were going to take one by one by one. Dr. Paulson basically said on several, from the 1 mil to the salaries, but I was hoping that you would go one by one because I have many things that I'd like to say, not only for measures and deliverables, but action as well. So I will be quiet until the citizen finishes.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely.
Okay, so the first caller, if I bring you in the right order, because there's a second one as well, is Carly Simon, who I've just admitted. Ms. Simon, let me make sure you're unmuted. Ms. Simon, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, you are providing your input at this time.
Okay.
And here.
I'm sorry, I don't make that very clear. I'm sorry. You're on with the board right now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
you, Simon.
Thank you very much for taking my my call. I would like the board to consider adding to the strategic priority a focus on online instruction, professional development, as well as actual working with Equality Matters to make sure that the curriculum is aligned across courses. I think it would be quite helpful, especially since we don't seem to know whether we will be going into a face-to-face setting at the beginning of the school year. This takes time and obviously resources, including assistance with instructional design professionals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
And Madam Chair, the next caller is Deidre Houchin, who I will be bringing in now. And then unmuting. Ms. Houchin, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, you are on with the board now.
I think some. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at YouTube, so there's a delay. I'm calling to find out more information about how the board is going to address the current equity plan in light of COVID-19 with regard to the strategic priorities. Given that we know that students who are in underperforming schools, and particularly Black and other students of color, their families are more deeply affected by COVID-19. I wanted to find out if there was going to be any kind of instructional support for those students in the next year, and more broadly, just to address the effects of the last 2 semesters with regard to online instruction, this semester and the previous semester. Those weaknesses that students might have, how that's going to be addressed in the equity plan. What I see here is that the last equity plan was update was done in 2019, perhaps November or September. So I'm hoping that that will be certainly updated prior to some approval with the strategic plan and the strategic priorities.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Houchin. Now we turned it back to Ms. Johnson. I don't know if you had finished, Ms. Johnson.
I'm told that I'm about to get one more call. So
Okay.
it's going to be Carl Smith. It's just not in my waiting room yet.
Okay, we'll
There.
wait a minute or
Now it's
two.
here. Now it's here.
Now it's in. Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Mrs.
Smith?
Townshend.
Yes,
Oh, okay, can you, you are on with the board now, but if you've got sound on in the background, it's going to be delayed. So you might want to turn that down.
I'm about to get one more call. It's going to be Carl, not in my waiting room yet.
Okay, we'll wait a minute or two.
Alachua.
Townshend.
Mr. Smith, can you turn down the audio in the background?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and then when that's done, you are on with the board now to provide your input on the strategic priorities.
Yes, this is Carl Smith. Good evening to the.
Good evening.
We lost him.
Yeah, this is Carl Smith. Can you
Yes,
hear
sir.
me, board?
Yes, sir.
I am calling to speak to strategic item number 3, where we indicate that we want to eliminate all of the D and F schools. I'm trying to pull it up now. And I was going to request the board to consider changing that instead of eliminating all D and F schools to something that more firmly positions us to have all A and B schools or all high performing schools. So it gets at it, but it takes the position that we want the Alachua County school system to be a high performing school system with all schools performing at A or B level. I'd like to submit that for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
And then that was the last caller for this action item.
Okay, Ms. Johnson?
Yes,
You wanna
thank you.
continue?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Roy. And Dr. McNeely, you are correct. The 6 priorities that I presented to the board were, of course, from last year. They are simply a jumping off point for discussion. The goal tonight was to hear from the board members what your strategic goals might be and to come to some sort of a consensus on what the strategic priorities should be for the 2020-21 year. So at this point, I'd be happy to entertain suggestions.
So Mrs. Johnson, do you want me to start in order with goal 1 and go through goal 6?
Board's pleasure.
Okay, go ahead.
If that's fine with the chair, then that's absolutely fine with me.
I think that we could discuss them 1 through 6. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Starting with goal 1, and I won't read unless you're going to put it up on the screen, Mrs. Johnson, what that goal is again. I would like to see included with action, continued update reports on all of our schools, because with all of the hardening that we did, I'm not sure where we are at this point, if we've completed it or if it's ongoing, but I would certainly like to emphasize that whatever we're doing as far as security purposes and projects, that we need to have a continual update report on those areas. I do have a question though. I'm looking at one of the action steps that would fall under goal 1, and that's to establish the district return to school task force. And I wondered what type of selection would we be doing for that? Will that just include staff, board members? What is that task force responsibility? I know it says to develop plans for reopening of our traditional schools, but other than that, I'm wondering about this task force because it's so important that we have a correct composition of people on this task force.
Right, so Ms. Johnson, I can respond to that. What Dr. McNeely is referring to were the tentative goals and objectives that I sent to the board. So they're not necessarily the board priorities. I just based those on what the board priorities were at the time on May 1. So obviously, if those board priorities were to change, then obviously I would need to change goals and objectives to meet the board's strategic priorities. Dr. McNeely is correct. One of the things is establishing that return to school plan and what that looks like. Based on whatever guidance we receive from DOE, you would be looking at staff members, both this district staff and also school-based staff, whether that's not just school-based administrators, but also teachers, that we would work with ACA to bring some teacher membership on that committee as well, to be able to work out some of those logistics. But then also when we talk about operations, then there would potentially be food service managers involved in that phase. So I don't know that it's necessarily an entire, here is the committee that's going to address every issue. I would envision that, yes, we're going to have a group, but then on each area that we're talking about, whether it's cleaning school buses, whether it's cleaning classrooms, whether it's recess and PE, whether it's virtual instruction, that you would have the appropriate staff members, but also school-based who are on the front lines of that involved in those discussions as well, because we want to make sure that we are hearing that input as well, to make sure that we are addressing those needs as part of that process. So that's where, but again, if the board changes priorities, we're still would be doing that anyway, but that was just one of those things I'd included in my piece. So not necessarily the board's priorities directly, but my goals and objectives to meet the priorities that are currently in place now.
Anybody else want to come in on goal 1?
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
So I won't be redundant in going through every single goal. If the board is getting ready to say all 6 of these are going to remain the same, then the questions and comments that I have based on the goals and objectives of Mrs. Clark, the superintendent, it still rallies discussion, because all we have here are 6 sentences, 6, titles, but you don't know what does that mean when you see eliminate all DNF schools. So that's why I compiled questions based on the strategic priorities and based on what I'm reading as action steps with Mrs. Clark.
Yes, ma'am. I certainly understand what you're saying. And as Ms. Clark indicated, we're talking about 2 separate but very certainly related things. There are the superintendent's goals and objectives, and then there are the school board's strategic priorities. So what you have in front of you are the strategic priorities from last year, but obviously the board can take those strategic priorities in any direction you choose.
Thank you. Thank you. Then I will continue.
If I could ask for the board's indulgence, it would just be easier for me as kind of keeping records here, keeping track here. Dr. McNeely, what I heard you say is that in addition to what it already says for the strategic priority 1, which is provide for safe and more secure facilities, it is add something along the lines of and provide regular updates on security measures on those security measures.
That's correct.
Security measures at district facilities?
At each of the schools, yes, and facilities in the district.
At district schools and facilities. And so, Madam Chair, would it be okay for me to get any other input on that particular?
Of course, you do it the way you think is more, is most efficient.
Okay, so at this point, if there are other board members who have input into strategic priority 1.
I already have.
Yes, sir. Yes, you did.
And it was like his replaced like we had before when we had the half-cent sales tax. I think that should be our #1 priority right now. It's for survival.
I think she's not saying not the 1 meal. She's asking about the priority about the safe and secure schools. If
She
anyone
said,
else,
no, I know, but I said that, but she said for #1. I think.
No, that was, Dr. Paulson, that was number one on the priority list.
Right, but I got that, but I think she was saying what's for number one now.
No, sir.
Number one is on the sheet. It's number one.
I know that.
We prioritize however it chooses. I'm talking about just this specific that right now is labeled number one, wherever the board chooses.
I got you. I just wanted to check.
Yes. On this particular priority, I was looking if the board has any, if any other board members have any suggestions or changes to suggest for this particular priority.
Madam Chair, I think as Dr. McNeely said, I think it's always important that we are informed, and I think also so a lot of this would be informed on a somewhat confidential basis to board members, because we're not going to be advertising exactly what each school has done. And I'm sure Dr. McNeely
Absolutely
meant that. But so I just wanted to clear that up for the public so they wouldn't think we were going to be distributing that. But I totally agree that keeping us up to date is what's happening where is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt, for clarification.
And Ms. Johnson, I actually have all that for the board. I did not put that in my May 1st report to the board for that very reason, because there was some specific school-based information that our facilities department and our safety and security chief had provided. And so I took that out from the standpoint that it was school specific, but I certainly have that readily available that the board is certainly more than welcome to.
All right, so assuming that we have agreement on that particular strategic priority, wherever it ends up falling in order, at this point, I'd be happy to take any more input on other strategic priorities.
So, Mrs. Johnson, I'm ready to look at, not in order, that this is going to be the second one on our priority list, but I'm going in the order that you gave us.
Sure.
So number 2, the salaries for instructional staff and ESPs, instead of being ranked in the upper 2/3 of the district, I'd like to see us at the top 1/2. I think we've carried this particular one 2 years or maybe 3 years in order. And so I'd like to see if we could agree that we would look at moving up the ranking to 1/2 state of district statewide, raising the minimum wage for non-instructional, the ESPs, to the $15 an hour without attaching the health benefits to that. And also taking a look at the compression of our steps between ESE, I'm sorry, not ESE, but ESPs and our instructional staff. I think right now that we have 28 for ESPs and 25 for instructional.
Does anybody have any input on that?
I do.
I did, yes.
All right. Dr. Paulson first and then Ms. Certain.
Look, $15 an hour is a goal to get. But if we put something specific we get to, that's how we've gotten up over 6% a year for the minimum wage for the ESPs. So I think if we just went to $12 an hour, we're on the way to get to 15. But we also have the health insurance, which other people don't. Example, we have people in the kitchen or food service people. They get full health insurance. If you were at the city, it'd be $3,000. So that's a big difference. That's why it needs to be counted. But I just, I've always said at the beginning, we want to go to $15 an hour when we started this 4 years ago. But I knew that we'd have to go in steps. I want to go where we can reach something right now. I don't think $15 an hour we can reach right now. We don't have that kind of money, but we can get there sometime. If we want to be realistic, we need to keep being realistic. And that's why we've gotten up as high as we have.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. What about the upper one half?
It's a good goal as long as we don't expect to get there right away, because we're at 43rd or 44th, depends on where you, which ranking you're looking at. The upper one half, we have to be 33rd. So if that's going to be, I don't see anything wrong. That's why we did the upper 2/3 to begin with, because it took a while to get there. So the upper one half will be all right. But specifically, I don't think, especially this year, we're not going to reach that. But we can go for that. I think the upper one half would be great. We actually, for our starting salary, which now we don't have to worry because the state got involved, we were only $100 short of being in the upper one half of the starting salary last year. So it is realistic. Realistic's good because then you can see things happening. So again, it's what we did with the upper 2/3. And if we go the upper half and we stick to that, then we're going to treat our teachers the way they should be treated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. Ms. Certain?
Thank you. I like Dr. McNeely's suggestion, and I think, and I can consider the input that you just received from Dr. Paulson. And I think goals are as such. Maybe you put the stake in the ground and we try to figure out a path of getting there. We don't really know what the state of Florida is going to do to education budgets in this coming year, given what we're in now. So if we got to 2/3, the top 2/3 with it being a goal. So I can agree with raising it to the top one half and letting that be a goal, and us trying to figure out a path of getting there, and working with Mr. Rell and his staff. But what I wanted to add was that last year when I came on the board and we were doing salary negotiations, it was my first time going through that, and we had the TESA funds and the UNICEF grant. And I really want us to really consider, to really try to reward and incentivize working in our chronically or persistently low performing schools. And the reason being, it's hard work. Our own superintendent has said twice, to my knowledge, that I can recall, that she can't make staff go and work over there because of the collective bargaining agreement and or whatever, for whatever reason. So if we have staff that work in those school environments that tend to be difficult, they should be paid on a different pay scale, is what I would suggest. I know trying to find money to do that is hard, but I think when we have special funds that are allocated, I think that's something that we should really work towards doing, as well as the assistant principals. I had one assistant principal saying they're kind of in that little gap bubble there where the principal can get an incentive when they're working on a low performing school. But if I understood what was communicated to me, the AP at the low performing schools were not getting any type of incentive for being in that work environment. And I think as an organization, they're there and they're putting in hard work. We really should try to let that be something that we incorporate into our financial plan as well, because getting good staff and rewarding them, not just paying people to be in a location, but we're wanting them to really work and to provide good instruction to our students in those challenging environments. We really should reward them for doing that. So that's all that I have to add on that particular item.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hyatt.
I'd like to say that I really appreciate the comments of each of my colleagues tonight on this issue. And these are all really important things to consider as we move forward. Just a couple of points. My concern is whatever amount of money we have, there is a danger that if you raise salary, which we all want to do, we all five want to do that, at some point, you have to cut staff, you have to cut jobs. And I would be hesitant to go too far beyond what is uncertain right now. And I know that we have a good relationship with ACEA, and we bargain hard and they bargain hard. So I just think that we've got to be very careful that we don't lose employees by raising the salary more than we can. I think the record we have the last couple of years has been really outstanding with salary increases. Most people around the state don't understand that we've made that commitment because they haven't. And so top half sounds great. To say that in one year, I think that's difficult. Also, I just as we're going through this, and I think it's a great discussion. My idea of priorities, and that doesn't mean it's any of the other 4 board members, is you have a strategic focus on several items. And as has been said a million times by the superintendent, that doesn't mean that's all we're doing, but that just means we're going to set aside these few items. So anyway, that was my 10 cents on that. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
Madam Chair, I appreciate Mr. Hyatt saying, we need to be cautious with our steps that we take, especially when we is talking compensation. But when I look at the other numbers here, like number 3 and number 4, we've had those and we haven't done anything with that either. And so I don't think it hurts to put the goal where you think that we can reach, because eliminating DNF, as Pastor Smith said tonight, take that out totally and put all A and B schools. I think that's what he said. But we have not moved the needle with certain areas because of the information that Jeff Charbonnet gave us with all of the rankings and all of those columns. And we I don't know the last time you looked at that. I'm talking to all 4 colleagues. The last time that you looked at that and really looked to see where we didn't move, where we didn't go anywhere, something has got to change. And so that's why if we maybe can help with our compensation, maybe we'll get more out of instructional staff, more out of our educational support professionals. I don't know, but I think we need to take a stab at it. And I thank you all for listening, but that's how I feel right at this point.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. I'd like to make a comment about that since everyone else has already spoken about the salaries issue. Of course, 1/2 is a great goal to be in the upper 1/2. The 1/2 is within the 2/3. If we make the 2/3, we are going to strive to do better than that. But I do think that it is, if Dr. Paulson says we're now at number 43, I don't know that we're in a year like this where we don't even know what our budgeting is, that we're going to jump 10 places or so. I just don't see that happening. And, if we put it in there, I don't want to be criticized for not making it, because obviously all of us want desperately to get our salaries up for every employee. So I would favor leaving it at the upper 2/3 district, and we strive, of course, for greater improvement. As far as
take that off though, because we're already at the top 2/3, right? I mean, the upper 2/3.
Pardon me?
We're already there, aren't we? If I understood correctly, the numbers that have been shared with us previously by Dr. Paulson, we're already in the top 2/3, right?
Yeah, I gave you that.
You said it was $100 away from being in the top half.
I said the starting salary was. The starting salary, which now we're going to have to be, it really doesn't come in focus with us anymore because we got to take all that money and try to raise the lower beginning salary.
Yes, could we clear that up, Ms. Johnson, before we go on? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
The beginning salary is at 40 right now. If another $100, it'd be like 34th, 35th. That's almost a half there. That's what I was talking about. If you want to make it a half, just like we did with the 2/3 when we came from 62 to 43, is we give it multiple years. So you say, okay, this is 2021, in 2023, we want to be in the upper half. That's realistic. That's what we did to get where we are right now, which is the greatest increase in the history of our school district. I don't want to sound like a certain person, so I won't say that again.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was-
I do appreciate that, Dr. Paulson, and also Ms. Certain. We have made great strides both with instructional and with ESPs in the last several years. I just wanted understood that if we say 1/2, we understand we're not going to make it in 1 year. And especially not in a year like the one that we're facing now. And we don't know. So, you know, if you want to put that in there and not hold the district to making it as a goal, that's fine. But the statement says salaries for instructional staff and ESP will be ranked in the upper 1/2 or 2/3. And it would be 1/2 of districts statewide. As far as the instructional staff with benefits, as Dr. Paulson pointed out, we are one of the best paid in the state, I believe, for ESPs. And again, yes, we want to pay more. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do every bit as well as we absolutely can. But I think 15 an hour, including benefits, if that same employee was paid this $15 an hour, they'd be paying $3,000 extra for health insurance if they were working for the city of Gainesville. They're not paying that with our payment package. Benefits is always included in the salary package. And so I would like to just say that my preference would be to keep it and do the best we could for both categories of employees.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. And let me clarify. I think I said, and Mrs. Johnson could read my statement again. I said without including the health benefits.
I heard you.
We're not saying eliminate the health. I'm just saying what we need to be at in spite of the health benefits, because every time we talk about how great our salaries are, we are adding the portion of the health benefit. And I'm going to tell you,
salary.
Right. I'm going to tell you, people can't eat the health piece, and they can't put a roof over their head with the health. I'm just saying these are my thoughts. And for a couple of years, we've always said we have the best because we have the great health benefits. So that's why I said not to eliminate the health benefits, but to raise the salary to the $15, and then you would have health benefits as well. That's what I was clarifying.
Yes, okay. Well, I think I did understand that, but
Okay.
I would like to know how much providing health benefits for all of our ESP costs the district. I think it's quite a significant amount. So just a consideration.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Dr. Paulson got dropped and he's back in. Oop, and then he dropped again. So he's obviously having trouble, and I will admit him as soon as he comes back in. Oh, he's been admitted. I'm sorry. My co-host was faster than I was.
Okay. So Mrs. Johnson, I'm going to move to number 3. Eliminate all.
I'm sorry, Dr. McNeely, before we move on to number 3, I don't feel like we have consensus on number 2.
Oh,
No,
probably not.
Excuse me, can I get an update? My screen went out for a couple of minutes. I had to get my grandson in here to help me. So I don't know what you're voting on. Did I
No
miss-
vote.
We haven't voted. It was continued discussion on the issue on salaries
Okay.
and continued debate on whether or not to change that to 1/2 or leave it where it is with the aspirational goal of getting it to 1/2, whether or not to include in the $15 per hour, whether or not to have that include or not include benefits. So, and quite frankly, that pretty much sums up where I'm not quite sure what direction the board would like to take this. I can try to wordsmith this in some way where we say that goal will involve working towards salaries for instructional staff and ESPs that will be ranked in the upper 1/2. We could somehow split the difference. I mean, we can obviously turn the fractions into percentages and find a middle ground there that everyone is comfortable with. But at this time, I don't.
Can I say something about the ESPs, about upper 1/2? They have so many different people. Example, if you're a bookkeeper, I remember when I had a bookkeeper. The bookkeepers in Alachua County were ranked 3rd in the state. Then we had custodians and they were ranked probably 60th. To say that, I think it's not the same. They're not unitary like the teachers are. I hope that lays some, and I've been in this business a long time on that. So, and then on the, what was the other one?
Instructional.
On the upper half, again, you do like we've done before and give 3 years. And then you work towards it, just with the idea you're not going to get there the first year.
Right. And Dr. Paulson, I understand that, but in as much that we've had the upper 2/3 of districts statewide, we've had this several years now.
No, we had it 1 year. Sorry.
I think that we can put the upper half, just like we have our other goals, other priorities, and work very diligently to get there.
Well, I have no doubt. I just said you make it a 3-year goal. That's what we did in the past, and it worked. Why not? If it worked, something works, why not use it?
I think Dr. McNeely may not hear you because it is hard to hear you. Maybe she's saying, Dr. McNeely, to let it be a goal and let it be a 3-year phase in instead of just trying to accomplish it all in 1 year. I'm not sure if you heard it, but I had to turn my volume up.
I don't know if I'm back or if I lost you all.
Well, Mrs. Roy had a good point. She said, we don't even know this year about the money. So what the thing is, I'm just saying, it worked. That's how we got from 62nd to 43rd. Now, if we want to go from 43rd to 33rd, then we might, do it in 1 year. It might not be realistic, especially with the money available. So you put it in a 3-year goal like that, and that's what we've done in the past. It worked better than anything's ever worked in the history of this district. So, that's a pretty good record.
Madam Chair, can you hear me? Because for some reason, it looks like I've lost all of you.
We can hear you. You're fine.
We can hear you.
Oh. Okay, I can't. I don't know how to get back.
Well, just say what you want to say. We all are listening.
Whew, I figured it out. Okay.
Well, I'm amenable to doing it if we stipulate it's a 3-year goal. But I thought we were just doing a strategic plan for a year. If we're doing it for 3 years in this instance, that's fine.
No, we've done it that way in the past.
Okay.
But not the other way. We've come up 26% up with the 929 to 1157. Be another almost 6% to get to $12 or a little bit above $12. With the idea, eventually, we do want to get to $15, but we've come halfway if we get to 12. And we are the only place that pays all employees, if they work 4 hours or more, 100% of health insurance. That is a lot of money, and I'm just realistic. Other people don't do that.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hyatt.
I would just say that I'm also in agreement that it shouldn't be a 1-year goal if we're going to say 1/2. Because I just, for me, I'm just not comfortable because I don't know numbers. I don't know that it's something that we can do. I haven't talked with Ms. Morella specifically about this. I don't know if any of us have, but I do agree with Dr. McNeely that if this is a priority, you set the goal and you find a way to get there. I'm concerned, as I said before, and I won't say it again, that it would be a problem as far as having to cut positions. I don't know that's true, but I think I think it could be a very difficult thing to raise salaries more than we already have without losing employees. So I would be in favor of a longer term goal. I do absolutely appreciate the goal set out by Dr. McNeely.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. One thing too that we don't know, besides not knowing the money that we're getting from the state, is how the state is going to require that it be allocated. Like, is it going to be 80% for beginning teachers and the 20% for the rest of instructional staff? We don't know that.
That's what it is right now.
That is what it is right now,
Yeah,
but
I've already looked at that in depth. And it's
But-
80%.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
80% to raise the people towards $47,000. But then you got different levels too. So that's got to be looked at. But then the other is, they said that to get over 2%, and I think they'd have that. If we didn't get any money cut right now, we could handle both that. The 40 would be 3.9 something million and almost $1 million more just for the people who get raises after that. So interesting.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, I guess we're back to you.
Yes. Just based on what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to wordsmith on my feet here, so I apologize. What about something along the lines of salaries for instructional staff will reach the upper 1/2 of districts statewide by the 22-23, 23-24 fiscal year? I don't know if that sounds acceptable to a majority of the board. And then
22-23 sounds good.
22, so that's a possibility for the first half, and then do something similar. I'm not sure what the board would like to see in terms of the minimum wage for non-instructional. Do we set it at 15 an hour, not including benefits, for the 2020 or 22-23 school year?
No, we need to include the benefits because that's a lot of money.
We cannot afford not to include the benefits.
We get
I'm not
something
saying,
minimally
I'm not saying not to include the benefits, colleagues. I said $15, but don't attach the benefits as if, you know, they're getting $15 an hour. They're not. That's including your benefits.
That's right.
That's the way I see it.
That's why it's worded that way, including benefits.
Well, I don't agree with it.
Well, it's a certain amount of money. If you have to pay an enormous amount for benefits, I mean, are we going to give the employees $15 an hour without benefits, or $15 including benefits? We can't
What's going to happen if we don't?
$15 an hour now.
When people like myself leave, the employees are going to start paying for their health insurance like they do at the city and the county. And now they're getting a cost of living raise that other people don't get. So if you take that away, you're going to be hurting a lot of people that are not real rich, especially like you're a food service employee or you're a para. You know, I've been doing this a long time. If you want to punish those people, take away the health insurance.
I don't think she's saying take away the
I
health
did not-
insurance.
I
think
never
her
said
goal,
take
her point is to say
I
to
never
raise the
said that.
wages and include the salary, not include the $3 and whatever. I couldn't hear what you said, what the insurance is, and I don't have the package.
Let me word this again. Because if you do that, you encourage people in future years to start charging for the health insurance. That is why you don't want to do that. You're going to hurt these people. And that's why I'm so emphatic about this. I don't want to hurt our most vulnerable. And that's what people are going to do. If you do what you want to go that fast, that there, what'll happen is when we're not here or somebody else is here, they'll start charging for health insurance. And that's something
They'll have to.
they have to, because there's only so much money.
That's right.
Got to give somewhere. So if you keep going up, we get to 15 with the health insurance staying 100%. That should be the goal. Think about some lady that's sitting there working 4 hours a day for 180 days, getting 100% of her health insurance. Think about that. Future boards and future superintendents and administrators are going to look at this and say that's not feasible to do. So what you should, if take the city charges over $1,000 even for a full time. That with 2016 hours for full time here, that's 50 cents an hour. So right now we're over $12 an hour compared to the city, really, because we're paying that money, and we started a year or two after them. But I'm just telling you, if you do it, I don't want to leave these people in bad shape, and that's what's going to happen if we do what you're wanting to do. We're going to hurt the most vulnerable.
We can't. Basically, we can't afford to pay $15 an hour and provide
right now
100% of healthcare coverage. It's either or. And I think if someone doesn't have health insurance and they have a heart attack or a stroke, it's horrible. They would never get out of debt in their lives, without insurance. They'd be bankrupt. I mean, go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I understood Dr. McNeely's point, and she was not saying to eliminate health insurance. She was saying simply don't use the calculation. And I wanted to just bring up another consideration is that let's say we go to that $15 plus health insurance. Are we talking about moving everybody up the same percentage? It seems to me like what would happen is the folks, we have some folks that moved up and some folks that wouldn't move up at all. I don't know how that would work. Maybe someone could help me with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
No, it doesn't. Rob, I don't think the key is, look, it'd be nice. What I'm saying is if you say it don't include the health insurance in the calculation to get over to 15 like we did and continue it and go there, I think we should go to $15 an hour. I just think it's going to take longer than you think. If we go to $12 an hour, we've gone from $9.29 to $12 in 5 years. That's not bad. 5 more years, you could be at 15 and you could look at that. But you don't ever want to try to get there too fast with this. I'm trying to tell you, because you're going to get people when we're not here that are going to say, well, we can't afford. I wish Alex would jump in on this, because you can't afford to have that health insurance. We're going up this year. We'll probably have a 10% increase in health insurance. And we're still making sure these people will have a plan. And we worked on other things like better co-pays and stuff like that for them. But the thing about it is, I'm working on this stuff for a long time, and you're going to hurt them. I'm telling you. Everybody, we're going to have 15. I think 15 is a very worthy goal. But we're not McDonald's, where they don't have any health insurance. We're not the city, where they charge people $3,000 to $3,500 at their half time. And we've had that presented to us. That's why I'm so emphatic about this, is because we've made tremendous strides. And we need to continue to make tremendous strides. We don't, we say 15. Look, I've said it. Eventually, we need to get to 15. But we don't need to do it and give up something that they have an automatic cost of living increase in health insurance. An automatic increase every year. Think about it. You want to give that up? I think that's cruel. That's because I've been dealing with this. These people, some of those ladies work just for the health insurance. So anyway.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. All right, Ms. Johnson.
Okay. So
I know this is an impossible situation for you.
So, I mean, do we have at least some consensus that salaries on the wordings along the lines of salaries for instructional staff will reach the upper one half of districts statewide by the 2022-23 fiscal year?
That's fine. I think that's realistic and good.
Yes. I'm fine with it.
Good.
Okay, and we're back again to the ESPs. Do we leave it where it is? Do we change it?
No, you can't leave it where it is. I say make it $12 plus the health insurance, because our cost is going to go up 50 cents on the health insurance that we contribute to an employee. And so they'll be they'll be at $16 an hour together. So if you said 12, now you've gone, or you could say 12.25. Figure out what 6% were. We gave them 6% last year. That's not bad.
I would agree with Dr.
The salary schedule this year. That's how I got it where it was, where I just took the lowest pay grade. You remember that? When I brought it in that time? Because the thing wasn't getting done otherwise. So we did that, and we got this up to 1157 plus 347 or something right now for the health insurance for a full-time employee, which you divide the health insurance into the hours they worked 2016. So I would say put a certain amount if you want to do it in 1 year. Put $13 an hour or something like that, plus full paid health insurance. Now you're getting a goal you can reach. I like to see that goal reached before I left, because I think we've done unbelievable what we had. Remember, it was 929 4 years ago.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hyatt.
I would just say that I agree with Dr. Paulson in that we absolutely cannot afford to be in a situation where our employees don't have the coverage. We do this, and I think we're much better than most private industry, most governmental industry, most government services, and so I think that if it's an either or, I'm going to side on keeping the insurance and making it an achievable goal.
I have, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. I have a question for Dr. Paulson and Ms. Certain, the gurus of finance. What is the hourly rate? We do not include benefits, I don't think, in our hourly rate or goals for administrators or teachers. Is that
we
correct?
do for teachers when we compare them. If you remember, North Central Florida, we're the #1 paying, including St. Johns County. And that's been presented to you every year. And that's
I'm asking the question. I don't have the memory that you have, Dr. Paulson.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. So we do that. Yes, we do it in that case. Otherwise, we don't do it the rest of the case, but we do it then, because that shows exactly what we're contributing to the employees. We actually contribute the most of any in North Central Florida, even to our teachers. So and Alex has presented. Everybody keeps saying that. I said, well, we do it, and so I'm glad you asked that question.
Is there any consensus from the board about changing this section of that strategic priority to raise the minimum wage to $12 an hour, $12.50 an hour, plus benefits.
right? I mean,
Well, I would just say if we're going to go for a 3-year goal, the way we are with instructional, why not make it consistent for ESPs?
that's fine.
How much could we go, Dr. Paulson, for 3 years? What would a real stretch be?
Oh, I'm looking right now.
14, maybe?
No.
13, 14?
13 to
13.50.
50. And then you're in shouting distance of $15.
Mhm.
I mean, it's.
So what do we say? If we're
Well,
making it a 3-year goal?
Okay, let's go. Well, I'm trying to. Should have my computer with me. 1272. All right. I'd say 1350 and see if you can reach it. And you still pay 100% insurance.
That's good for me for 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So that would be raise the minimum wage for ESPs to $13.50 an hour. And again, I want to make sure, because there's obviously debate. That particular amount does not include, we're still going to pay the benefits, but that particular amount does not include the benefits. It's $13.50, not including benefits by the 2022-23 school year.
Yeah, by that time, they'll be paying $17 an hour for a full-time employee. Which is not, hopefully we can do that. Right now, we're paying $20 an hour for food service employees.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I could
Dr.
live
Bailey.
with that.
You'd go with that, okay? And Mr. Hyatt, what about you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Certain?
That's fine.
Okay, so let me read that back, make sure we have a meeting of the minds on this. So salaries for instructional staff will reach the upper 1/2 of districts statewide by the 2022-23 fiscal year. Raise the minimum wage for ESPs will reach $13.50 an hour, not including benefits in parentheses, by 2022-23.
Good.
Good.
Okay, that's 2 down. Okay.
That was a good discussion. Thank you, everybody.
And
all right, we're at number 3. Is that right, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
So Mrs. Johnson, even though we are having to hold on to, because there was no testing or whatever, so we kind of had a pat on the back. I shouldn't say a pat on the back because I've been attending our DA schools this year. So I'm not going to say a pat on the back, but it eliminates or us saying D and F, nothing really happened other than the goals that we looked at that Jeff Charbonnet gave us and where we hadn't moved the needle. In some instances, we went down. So I'm hoping that we can do more for the 2021 year coming up. And I know that the superintendent has really put in a lot of great things that she feels will move the needle. I'm so hopeful that we can get there. But I do have some questions because when we have to evaluate the superintendent in a couple of weeks, I think Attorney Delaney told us to have everything in by June 1. But in the years to come, I really think we've got to look at this differently, whereas the results are not going to come in before we do Mrs. Clark's evaluation. So something has got to change just in that regard, because we have no basis unless she's going to take from last year and the year before, which is not good, because that's all we have to go on. So I think the evaluation should be, but and I'm saying this in reference to the D and F, after the FSA, or if the state is going to ever go back to testing, and I can almost guarantee they will, it's going to really hit the superintendent hard. So I think it should be after, but for the future years. But for D and F right now, in as much that I'm noticing that she's even recommending to have a principal on special assignment, I'd like to know, what does that mean? Because we've been down that road before and still had D and F schools.
Right, so I can answer that question. Well, yes, we do still have DNF schools, but if you recall back last year in May, and actually I think it was April, if I'm not mistaken, when the board established the priorities, eliminating DNF schools was still on there even from the previous year. And that was prior to us receiving our scores and school grades for the 18-19 school year. And we did actually reduce from 6 to 3. So we are making progress towards that goal on eliminating DNF schools. But as in looking at the current structure we have in place and receiving some feedback from board members, from our principals, it may be something that we need to do, and it's certainly something we can continue to discuss. But do we need one specific person? Right now we have a team approach to addressing our DA schools, which again, we cut that number in half. So while a team was trying to serve 6 schools in the 17-18 school year, specifically that were in DA status, or SI as it's known now, now that team was focused primarily on those 3 schools. But yet what we're also doing is continuing to provide support to the schools who exited that DA status. We don't want to just say, okay, you don't have a D anymore, we're not providing any more support. So currently we have a tiered structure of support, whether schools have exited that status and schools that are still in that status. So to be able to provide that, currently we have the University of Florida in place working at Terwilliger. We have a consultant in place at Williams that's working with that school. So it potentially would be a way to, instead of having individual consultants at schools, and I'm not referring to the university specifically because we're in a multi-year agreement with them, to provide more frequent and structured support for those schools that fall into either the SI category or those that have recently exited and that we are still providing support for. And those are the schools where we continue to provide supplemental resources to make sure that they're able to keep up with what initiatives were in place at that school so they could exit that status. And so we've talked with staff to look at where's kind of a threshold, even with our C schools. There's a wide range in that C range of schools that are close to a D and those schools that are very close to a B.
And
So looking at,
you've got all your more performing schools where when we get to number 4 with lowest quartile, you've got a lot of children in those schools,
correct,
that are not up to par.
Absolutely right. And that's why if we were to bring in something like this as a turnaround coach or a principal on special assignment to work with the curriculum department, not only are you working on the school as a whole, where you're talking to eliminate those DNF schools, but then also having additional support to focus on lowest quartile in all of our schools, because we all know that we have students in all of our schools that need additional support. So it's a way to further provide some structure within our schools. They've already started working on some of that, moving to 2021. Some more structure support for the schools, but also structured interventions, because we've got a lot of different programs that are out there and a lot of supplemental resources, and we're trying to corral those back in, because when you have so many resources, it's difficult to provide support for 15 or 16 different supplemental programs that schools have purchased over time. We're trying to streamline that. So where there's there's a few programs after we've done some review of those programs with schools that have seen success in some of their students of what will that look like when it comes to intervention. So that's some additional support we would want to provide that really would either free up curriculum staff to work on the lowest quartile or vice versa. So it could go either way with that particular position. But again, it's still something that we can continue to discuss.
I just wonder what would the financial implication be for that position?
Well, it'd be something along the principal pay range, but it's something that we could cover out of Title I funds. So it would not be an impact to the general budget, but it would be somewhere in that principal pay range, depending on the experience of the person and all of that.
I would certainly like to see, Mrs. Johnson, thank you, Mrs. Clark. I would certainly like to see maybe if we could have and I guess with this new position, that if the board should go with that, to develop a department of school transformation as well as performance and student achievement. Something else is going, and I know how hard our curriculum department works, but in visiting Williams and Lake Forest and Idlewild this year, and all of the schools that I did not get to, but those are our DA schools colleagues, those students, and now that we've been in the COVID-19 experience, can you only imagine what's going to happen when we do test to see where those children fall? I'm so afraid. And I truly feel that we need to have some type of transformation, a department that will look strictly at school transformation and increasing performance in student achievement. I'm hoping that we can add that some kind of way into our D and F. Number 3.
Well, I'm along the lines of what Dr. McNeely said. A concern I have is the federal index, not just at the SI schools, but at all the schools. But I am, that is of urgent, that should be really urgent for us to really raise the performance of our low performing schools, all the students. And I'm gonna tell you, like Dr. McNeely's, I was at several of the meetings at Idlewild, Williams, and Lake Forest. And to the other colleagues who didn't join us, you would almost like you dismiss the school grade when you see how it can be manipulated. And if I was a parent of a student in any of those schools right there, I'd be okay if my child was chosen. You know, I sat, the last meeting I went to was a 2-hour meeting at Williams, and for almost 2 solid hours with the DOE consultant and the school leadership and our folks in the room, it was like they were looking at each of these students to see who they could target to raise their score so the school grade would be raised. Now that's fine for those students because that means they're getting some targeted intervention, extra instruction and things of that nature. But for those other 300 kids that weren't getting that, 280 kids or whatever, then that, if I was one of their parents, I would have just like been wanting to flip. So for me as a board member, but more importantly as a citizen of this community and knowing people that have children that attend those schools, we got to do better, and we got to bring our A+ game. If I'm Superintendent Clark, I won't delay the meeting and want to talk to you about your plan and how you think you'll get there. But that is something that I really would like to have a conversation, because what I saw this year, I am the accountant on the team, and what I saw in visiting the schools, it was quite an educational experience for me. It really was. It was quite an educational experience for me. So I think that goal there bumped up. I hear everybody say the 1 meal should be the one goal, but if we're in the business of educating students and creating a system, as Pastor Smith said, of high quality and high performing schools, that really should be what our goal is. That should be the number 1 goal.
And in talking with thank you, Mrs. Certain, for adding those comments, because you did attend all of the meetings that we were having with the DA schools. And it is an eye opener for all of us, those who are in education and those of us who are not. When you take a look at the increases and decreases of whatever, and I tell you, I don't know how you all feel, and I think I just heard it from Ms. Certain, but I don't sleep well at night when I think that the state is gonna double right back on us, and all of the virtual teaching and instructional continuity packets that went out. We still know the lack of education that the children who were struggling anyway, we've got to do something different. And so I'm hoping that the recommendation I just made, and Jackie could read it again, not only that, but I'm hoping that our departments will work closer together, our Title I, our equity department, I haven't heard much about that this year, our principals, the curriculum department. I know you all do a lot of data chats, but those departments cannot work in isolation. They have to come together and focus on what's wrong in the schools that we are not moving the needle. And let's face it, go back to Jeff Charbonnet's workshop, and you can agree with me.
Okay, I would like to say something. I think maybe we could combine, if we want to compress the goals, 3 and 4. And I would like to know the lowest quartile. I share Dr. McNeely's fright about how those kids are going to perform, when they start making us award grades to the schools. I'd like to know how many of those children are attending school regularly. I know that we've had this discussion before about absenteeism. Obviously, if they're not there, they're not learning. I don't know how attendance is checked when they're doing virtual school, homeschooling. I know that's very difficult for a lot of families because they don't have the Wi-Fi and they don't have enough computer coverage for the children to get their lessons. But all of that is definitely tied to the lowest quartile as to the kids who are getting to school and are signing in for the homeschooling too. So, I think that's just got to be taken into account I'm afraid for those kids. I'm very afraid. As far as that being our number one goal, I think that's a good number one goal. I think that the 1 mil will be taken care of in November, one way or another. But we cannot not emphasize the 1 mil because it puts such resources in all the schools and, provides technology for all the schools. It provided the computers that have been issued to families that don't have computers or computer access. I still would like to talk about perhaps having Chromebooks or something. I know that that's not a target for right now, but that's my input on this.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hyatt.
I'm not sure. I think I understood Dr. McNeely's request. I certainly understand her end goal, which should be all of our end goals. But I sort of, I understood as maybe create a new department. And I don't know that just sort of on the fly at a board meeting, that's the best thing to do as a priority. I think it would be a perfect workshop topic. I don't mean a workshop down the road. I mean a workshop soon. And let's see what other districts, how they approach it. Let's compare what we're already planning now. And so I'm not in any way opposed. I just don't know that that just right off the bat, that's something that I think is ready to enact. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
Mrs.
Yes, Dr.
Roy, Madam
McNeely.
Chair, for Mr. Hyatt, that's a strong recommendation. I didn't say make a department. That is a strong recommendation that we need when you look at the transformation of our school system, our district, our children that are not doing well. So when you have time this week, any of you, go back and look at the data, not just that, any data from the State Department, because I think that's where Jeff Charbonnet pulled his. But when you look at the state and you look at Alachua County, and then you look at the Black children, the white children, something is going to change, and we've got to do a better job at it. We've got to help the superintendent to figure out what else is it. And you made a good point. Look at the other districts. But guess what, Mr. Hyatt? I'm always looking and seeing some of the other districts, trying to stay within the confines of the enrollment like we have. You know, not just looking at Orange or Hillsborough or Miami-Dade, but looking at districts that are comparable to us. And we're not getting there. I don't know about you all, but I'm tired of hearing where we fall in the state. And with the University of Florida and Santa Fe College in our back doors, and I know we have James Patterson, is that correct, Mrs. Clark, Literacy Challenge and UFly and all of these other things, but until we come together, and maybe this position that the superintendent is considering, maybe if that individual could kind of grasp what I'm saying tonight to Mrs. Johnson, maybe we will see a difference with academic performance and achievement. We're not there. And as far as Mrs. Roy recommending to combine goal number 4 with goal number 3, I can't really see that, in as much that we're looking at how many points. And I said last year it wasn't rigorous enough. So I was going to present to my colleagues tonight that instead of 2 points or 1 point or 3 points, that we need to be striving 5 to 10 points. Because if we keep on with these 2 points, it'll be 25 years or more before we reach our goal. And I know you don't want that. So we really need to look at something different there. And that's why I can't necessarily agree with Mrs. Chairman Roy to say that goal 4 and goal 3 need maybe to be combined. I would think that when we are looking at our administrators at our schools, we certainly don't ask them to come up with a 2% increase or a 3% increase. No one should be given that small amount to change academically our students, because we'll never get there. It'll be forever.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Johnson, how are we doing? I know, this is really tough.
Yeah, certainly fascinating discussion, but we definitely are no closer to coming up with strategic priorities either for, for 3 or for 4 or, so, and I would certainly defer to, say, Mr. Delaney, who's certainly more of an expert on the superintendent's evaluation and the instrument for that. I would just remind the board that this document is meant to drive the district's budgeting process. It is, while there is certainly overlap, it is not the basis for the evaluation of the superintendent. So I don't know if that helps, but again, I just haven't gotten a sense from the board, at least in terms of a consensus on where we are with goal 3 at this point.
Which one's goal 3 again?
Goal 3 says eliminate all D and F schools.
Well, we started out, we had F schools and we eliminated them. We need to eliminate the D schools and then we go on from there. I agree
couldn't
with
hear Dr.
Reverend
Paulson.
Smith that we have, that it's good that we want to have all our schools be at the top. But right now, I remember when we hired the previous superintendent, I had 2 things I just said, tell me the truth. And the other one was raise the scores in East Gainesville. And I just think, I think you don't have to make priorities that difficult. We got rid of the F schools. Now let's get rid of the D and then go from there. Just keep going. And eventually we'll get where Reverend Smith says. And that's the goal eventually. But right now we don't need any D schools. We didn't need any F schools and we don't have them anymore. But let's go to the next step and then keep going. Anyway, that's my how I see it.
Our overall school grades, except for the schools that are the 3 that are in SI, are greater than D. They're a C or higher. But when you disaggregate the data and we look at the student performance by student subgroup, we had like 20 schools, I think, that had a subgroup. There were a lot of them that was either D or F for Black students. So if we want to, we can certainly say we can eliminate the F school, take the F off of that goal because we don't have any F schools, thank God. But I think in adding to the goal needs to be that we have all of our schools that are functioning at a C or higher for their overall school grade. But then we should be focusing in on are raising the performance of students in schools that have high school grades.
Doesn't that goal say lowest 25 percentile district wide too, Jackie?
Yeah, so I think we should have the goal on that one there. We didn't get there yet, but I was going to make a suggestion. We put a percentage on that at least have 50% of all the students district wide that are in our lowest quartile, that we're bringing those students up, that we're raising them up. And then that would, I think, do a whole lot to moving up those federal indexes for Black students in different schools.
How hard do we have to do that to get that, so we can look at what we could phase it in or do it all in one, or what? We say 50%. How many right now district wide are low? 29%, 30? The lowest quartile?
I don't have that data up now, Dr. Paulson, but I don't think that I'm in the boat with that Dr. McNeely is in. 2 and 3% increases will never be like one of the action steps that says, oh, we'll have everyone reading on grade level in 5 years. Well, you can't do that if you're raising ELA scores by 2%. You're not going to do that. That's at least not.
Well, that's why we need to have the figures so we can do something and that we can work for. That, we had one thing about it says the lowest quartile, but then, we have 2 people in lowest quartile, level 1, level 2, right?
You get 50%. If you got 2 people in the lowest quartile,
two groups.
One of them, then you got 50%. So if it's a smaller number, it's a smaller increase.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, if you want to be more specific, we got to be something we can look at and do, instead of just doing something we can't do. Let's look at it, get the numbers, and then set up a goals. And do it. Karen, you were at Sandy Hollins and went to every school and went through every grade, didn't you? Put a book out, remember a notebook? Is Karen still here? Karen?
I'm still here. I just don't understand. Can you repeat the question? I don't understand your
Remember when
question.
Sandy was here and then you became superintendent, you went through the whole district and set up goals for these students in every school.
Yes,
Correct.
Raise.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff we need. And if we do that, then we come in here and make legitimate goals that we can work for. That's what I'm saying. But right now, when you say I want to have the lowest quartile, well, people might work on the level 2s more than the level 1s. But that's because that's all it says is the lowest quartile. And people look at that and they work the grades. We could be more specific. We had more information. But right now, if we want to have something, what can we do? If we can raise all the lowest quartile to what? What do you want to do? What are we saying right now?
Well, it looks like we had a very vague goal in the previous fiscal year. And then the superintendent came with measurables and deliverables. So I guess that's something that we could work through with her outside of a board meeting or in a workshop. So,
but I think it still should be part of our priorities.
I want it to be part of the priorities to eliminate all D schools as well as raise the scores of our lowest quartiles in English and language arts. I'm not saying we drop it off. You're asking for specifics. And my point is that we didn't have a specific on it in the previous year. So now this year you're saying we need numbers to put a specific on it. I'm a little confused by that. If it was okay last year, why does it have to be so specific now?
Why shouldn't it be? Because we want to get the kids up. That's why.
Well, you didn't want to get them up last year in this current year.
That's unfair statement.
I'm saying
it's an unfair statement.
I'm saying we leave it like we have it is what I said.
I think we should try to get the kids up. I told you when we hired the previous superintendent, that was my goal. And then we walked in and Lake Forest's scores went down his first year. How about that? But then we went and put in money out of the Title I because
we number on what's number 5 now, number 4 now, raise the scores of the lowest quartiles. We don't have a specific number. So if we want that to still be a goal, I'm saying we just carry it forward. What is the current number 4 on the list that Ms. Johnson is projecting periodically? We carry that forward. We can then individually work with Superintendent Clark where we agree upon with her on this sheet that she gave us that has her measurables and deliverables and action steps on it. That's where specifics, where she gets down to nuts and bolts on what the percentages and things
that will do that.
And I'm hoping though, we will not allow the lowest quartile group of children to be combined or compressed with our D schools. It needs to be a separate entity for both D schools and then our lowest quartile children that we're talking about. Because you got lowest quartile over at Childs and Meadowbrook as well.
I agree with you, yes.
Well, we got them separated there, and I'm telling you, that's what Sandy Hollinger and Karen did 3-4 years ago. They went to every school and put in a plan for these kids. And we all got that notebook, except for Tina, of course, because she wasn't on the board.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Hyatt.
Just bringing up a little bit of a concern as far as a measurement on item 4. Regardless of what we do percentage-wise and what kids we're talking about, how do we raise the scores when there's no baseline for the scores? So, is that anything that, I know that's seemingly the best thing we can possibly do is raise the scores of kids that need that are ranked lower in their testing. But how do we measure that if there's no test this year? And maybe the superintendent could speak to that, but I think we're sort of, I don't know what we're setting ourselves up for because there's no data to prove it.
Mr. Hyatt, I asked the superintendent that same question as far as selection or ESY. And I was told that the principals and teachers have the data to support who will be coming to summer school. And there was no testing giving during these last couple of 2 months. but she says they have so there is a base, they have some kind of baseline.
Right.
If you're saying that they can identify kids who are coming to ESY.
Madam Chair, if I could speak to that, yes,
Sure.
there was school-based data and our progress monitoring assessments through the school year. We issue progress monitoring plans to with parents at the semester based on teacher recommendation, assessments within the classroom, and our district progress monitoring assessments. So in a year where we are absent of actual state assessment data to require summer school or invite to summer school, depending on the grade level, that's what we have to rely on, is the school-based data coming from the teacher and the school-based progress monitoring assessments. Now, in any other and in any other year, you would also have potentially previous FSA state assessment data to be able to have some other data, because it's not one data point that we would use to recommend summer school. Now, moving forward, where we're talking about the lowest quartile, there's always going to be a lowest quartile in an assessment situation. The way that test is designed and the way the reporting is designed, there is always going to be a lowest quartile. And so part of that process is when you look at the movement of the students and the learning gains of the lowest quartile, because a student who is a level 1 student could make more than a year's worth of growth and still not score level 3. What we're still waiting to hear is you're not going to have now scores to be able to compare, because you compare 3rd grade to 4th grade and 4th grade to 5th grade. Well, you're going to not have test data this year. So learning gains for students may not even be in the picture for next year of what that looks like. So I think, however the board decides they want to word their goals, I think that that's something that has to be taken into consideration, because we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know how school grades will be calculated next year because learning gains are a part of that school grade calculation. We don't know how the lowest quartile will be determined solely based on performance, but the learning gains are not going to be there for them as well. So, and that's an important data point. So, I mean, I think that that's something that we would have to look at. And again, it's not going to be a traditional year for those data points. Any other year, you'd have an easy reference point for the data, but you just don't have that this year.
Well, thank you, Dr. McNeely, and thank you, Superintendent Clark. And I'm certainly, I think all of us are concerned about what the state is going to come up with. You know, and that's, I think from history, we can figure it's not going to be favorable. But anyway, thank you for that answer.
Good point, Mr. Clark.
One of the things I want to say before Mrs. Johnson moves over to the next item, I know we said we don't know what the future holds for the monies, but I'd still like to emphasize that if we could have maybe a committee, I won't say department, but in as much that we may have this special extra person to facilitate in our district, the DA schools and the lowest quartiles children in all of the other schools, that maybe, and I'm just saying maybe, Jackie, I wrote down eliminate for goal through 3, eliminate all D and F schools and establish or a committee of school transformation to support struggling schools and help with increasing student achievement at those schools and all students. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does. So you are talking about sort of combining those and certainly understanding the limitations, because without the data points, yes, raising the scores of the lowest quartile is hard to see how meaningful that would be without scores. And again, with the goal of these strategic priorities to drive the budget, if the goal is to, if perhaps this could be worded in such a way where the goal is that we eliminate all these schools and provide resources, targeted resources to increase the achievement of students, particularly low performing students.
And I love the word school transformation, because that's what we're trying to do every single day. We're trying to transform what we currently have. We have a good school system, but it can be better. And I know if we put all of that together, it will work. Oh, and I want, Mrs. Johnson, let me give you this information here. I wrote it here, 40% for the lowest quartile in ELA.
I'm sorry.
And 44% in our math, and 50% is doable if we could reach for that target. We already have 44% in ELA. I'm sorry, 40% in ELA and 44 in math. If we put, say, at a 50%, that's doable. That's not that many points.
And I'm sorry, I will need some help from somebody who is more familiar with the grading system, because I'm not exactly sure what that means. What the
Ms. Clark knows what I'm saying.
Means for the lowest quartile.
Yes, ma'am. 40% in ELA, 44% in math. And if we stretched and said at least 50%, that would be doable. It should be. If we can't get to 50%, we need to shut down.
Dr. Manila, I just want to clarify, when you're saying 40, is that the percentage of
That's where we
the
are.
lowest, 40% at the
quartile,
lowest
yes, ma'am.
quartile making learning gains is 40% and then 44 in math?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just don't have it in front of me, so I just wanted to confirm what you were saying.
But anyway,
But
that's
I think
something that we can certainly look at.
Do we incorporate that language into the strategic priority? And how do we do that if we don't have a baseline for this year?
That's what I was going to tell Dr. McNeely. What I would like to maybe emphasize that we go back to the wording that you use of targeting resources to schools so that they could increase. And I really would like to see in those DA schools, those classrooms to be smaller than what the class size is, because some of those rooms we went into, the students needed a lot of assistance, and it was just the classroom size was too big. And so this isn't anything new to Superintendent Clark, because I've mentioned that to her. I haven't spoken to my colleagues, but I like that focus of targeting resources there. And I also will just say for you all, I don't think the one extra unit out of Lake Forest and Ottawa and those is enough. One extra unit is not enough for them to really get those class sizes down where they can really, the teacher can really focus and target in and help the students there. So.
Karen?
Sir.
How much, remember when we put all that money into Lake Forest, Duval, and Metcalf and Rawlings?
Mm-hmm.
That was what I was talking about. That's when Lake Forest scores that got down here before. We put in more than one unit. And it wasn't just a teacher unit, it was other units too, remember?
Right. Well, and at that particular time when we did that, the parameters of Title I were a little bit different. So there were more district level decisions made with Title I dollars where we could say, okay, we're going to, out of the Title I budget, provide a full-time reading coach or a full-time math coach or an extra counselor or whatever we felt like that the school needed in consultation with the principal. With the 70-20, they changed the parameters for Title I. And so the district doesn't have that same decision-making power. It gives more autonomy to the principals. So there is actually more money flowing directly to the schools for the principals to make those determinations in conjunction with Title I and the curriculum department. So for example, yes, we've given one unit to an Idlewild and one unit to a Lake Forest. But at the end of the day, when you look at the dollars between UNISIG and Title I and school improvement dollars that they had to work with, they had right at $1 million at their disposal this year to be able to either purchase technology, to purchase teacher units, to produce, to have coaches, guidance counselors, whatever it is that they wrote into their grant. Those dollars were there. So that there is supplemental funding that's there. It's not all going to come from one funding source. But Lake Forest was in a similar situation, as was Williams, because they had those extra dollars. So there is funding flowing there that those decisions can be made. And the teachers, with the unit that we give out of the general operating budget, the principal just has to explain to us how they want to use that unit. And in some cases, it is to reduce class size.
So we give them flexibility.
Right. We give the principal the flexibility to make that determination. But the Title I fundings, which there are several $100,000 that are in those schools, they have the flexibility where they can use those units for class size. They could, instead of purchasing or buying teachers, I hate to use that word, but instead of funding teachers, they can fund classroom paras if that's what they want at their
You
schools.
can have summer school.
They can extend summer school, and that's how we were able to fund summer school this year. We had some
That's how
rollover
we did it
dollars,
with
and schools held some money back. And so we were able to offer summer school across the board this year rather than just third grade. So there is still that flexibility that the schools have, because there are significant dollars that are flowing into those schools. It's just a matter of how those funds are being used.
All right, good.
Good. Well, this is cosmetic, but it kind of addresses the concerns of Reverend Smith. Instead of saying eliminating D schools, could we maybe say ensuring all schools are either an A, B, or C?
Yeah.
And then go on with the rest of it, as you said, Ms. Johnson.
That
Remember
works.
something.
I mean, it's just a different way of phrasing it. As you said, it's cosmetic, but that's fine with me. I can be.
It's a more positive statement than a negative.
Sounds good to me.
So if, let me see if I've got something that everybody feels comfortable with. So what if we take the 3 and the 4, and it's along the lines of ensure all schools are graded A, B, or C, semicolon, provide targeted resources to low-performing schools to increase student achievement, particularly among those scoring in the lowest quartile.
Sounds good to me.
That's fine.
It sounds good, Jackie. I just hope that the children who are in the lowest quartile, when you separate it like that, that they won't be lost in the desert.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that you wanted to separate it. I was just going to, it was all going to be one strategic priority.
Mrs. Roy suggested combining 3 and 4, and I said I thought that it needed to be separate. But if you can craft it where you're still focusing on eliminating, well, you're not going to have the D anymore because you don't have any F schools anyway.
Right.
But increasing the scores of students in the lowest quartile, and some kind of way we've got to figure out the rigor for doing that, because if we leave it at 2%, I'm here to tell you how many, the mathematicians on this board figure out how many years we're talking about.
You get the point, yeah.
Is everybody comfortable with that wording of a strategic priority?
I am. Is everybody,
Yes,
what
you
about,
just-
I'll take a poll. Ms. Certain, are you comfortable with that?
I am.
Thank you.
That's.
Mr. Hyatt
Yes, Madam Chair.
and Mrs. Dr. McNeely,
All right.
Dr. Paulson.
All right.
Good. Oh, good job, everyone. All right.
Number
Mrs.
5.
Johnson?
We're at goal 5, which currently reads continue implementation of equity plan with currently identified targets with emphasis on reducing the achievement gap.
The targets that were identified, I think both, I said previously that that's along the line that goes with the previous discussion are too low. So I think the targets need to be higher. 2% and 3% increments are not sufficient of a target to really be trying to achieve our goals. So. And also with our hiring, minority teacher hiring and retention, I've got some concerns with that, with a couple of stories that I heard of non-renewals here recently. So we want to recruit minority teachers. We have to make sure we're doing what it takes to retain those same teachers and having them work in a welcoming environment and not be kind of nitpick and then just said they're not going to be renewed for any reason at all. And the principal doesn't have to give them a reason. So I think that's all cultural competency and all of that type of stuff that's in the plan that's written down really needs to be, we really need to look at that and make that something that we're really practicing. So.
Madam Chair, I have to agree with Mrs. Surton with the latter portion, with all of it, but especially the latter portion. I've already had my conversation with Mrs. Clark and Mr. Purvis about how we went about this year after spring break in non-renewal of instructional staff. We really need to be more cognizant of how that is working in some of our schools and really looking closely at it. We're getting beat up really badly. And if you don't know individuals who were in those situations, then you wouldn't understand what I'm talking about with our instructional staff.
I would just say about the instructional staff, Mrs. Clark, that we obviously, the contract says that we can non-renew anyone without a reason for a year. I think we really need to, I know we have programs in place that help beginning teachers, but you know, we're just, we're not in a position where we can lose teachers. And if they're not quite up to par year one, I just would like to provide some kind of help to allow them at least another year to get their feet, especially if they're teaching in a tough school, you know, just my 2 cents worth there.
Sure, Ms. Roy, if I may, you know, part of that process, yes, that is outlined and that is a longstanding provision in the collective bargaining agreement, but also in state statute about the retention of teachers. Where I think we've got to continue to work, and we have been working, and I think we are constantly improving that, but still need to work towards that direction, is providing that timely and specific feedback to teachers. Because if there are issues that are surrounding job performance, we want to make sure that we are providing timely feedback on that and ways to improve. And so the same way we would provide timely feedback and specific feedback to our teachers, senior staff needs to provide that same feedback to our administrators as to making sure that we are following that same process and that we are providing feedback where it's necessary with our instructional staff and our support staff as well. But I know we're talking specifically about instructional staff. So we will continue to work through that. You know, at the end of the day, we want to retain all our teachers. We want to hire the very best and highest quality teachers and retain them, no matter their race or their gender. So we want to make sure that we continue to provide that support to our teachers, but also to our principals who are coaching those teachers and who are providing feedback to improve their instructional performance.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Mrs. Roy?
Yes, ma'am.
In
Go
all
ahead.
due respect for the superintendent, she said it just correct, and that's the way it should be said. But when we don't follow the actions of what the superintendent just stated, we're in trouble. And that's all I'm going to say. She knows, we're in deep trouble.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hyatt.
Getting back to the item 5, I believe that's it. I would recommend that we keep item 5 as is, and we can certainly go back and look at identified targets and discuss if there should be changes. Since if we're looking at the actual wording here, the specific targets aren't identified in this document. So I think that can be something that we can work through and look forward to. But I would guess, and it's of course only a guess, that most board members would agree with the sense of number 5.
How do people feel about that? Ms. Certain?
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to poll people.
I was just going to tell you, Madam Chair,
Sure.
that your percentage points are the same. And again, this goes way back to where we were on goal 3 and goal 4. If you intend to increase your lowest quartiles, if you intend to increase all of the student performance and academic achievement, then you're going to be hard put to do it with 2%. My suggestion would be to reduce the achievement gap by 5%. There are some things that I'm sure Mrs. Clark would agree with me about professional learning communities, increasing those in our schools. When we look at, I like to go back to the graphs that we got during our workshop. When we look at the participation of our Black and Latino students, I think that we need to increase participation for those 2 races by 5%. I'm on a 5% kick tonight because to me, 5% helps us much further along than the 2% that we are stipulating here that we already have.
Okay. Well, Dr. McNeely, I think what Mr. Hyatt said, since we're not specifying in this statement, we all agree that we want to continue implementation of the equity plan, but we can work on targets later and not specify in this statement. So that was what I was asking about.
I guess I'll question you, Madam Chair. When is your later? When will you be working on the targets? I'm all right with staying status quo, but
yeah,
what timeline are we talking about here?
Can we discuss that, Ms. Clark? What do you think? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm unmuting. I was checking some data. We can certainly work through those targets at any point. Now, I assume you all would be voting on this evening. It's up for a vote to finalize these. But as I said at the beginning of the discussion, the tentative goals and objectives that I presented to you all on May 1st, which is required by contract, I didn't have this year's goals and objectives to work from. So I can go back and revise those based on what your strategic priorities are. So generally the priorities have been much more general, and then we can plug in those action steps and targets, beneath that. So we can certainly work through that once this is approved. I can work with staff on that and look at those goals. We certainly can plug some numbers in there. Just, specifically, Dr. McNeely just mentioned the participation piece. So for example, when we talk about the 5%, I'm just scrolling through real quick here. looking at last year, the number of students that number of Black students enrolled in advanced placement courses increased by 8% this year already. Our goal was 2% and we were at 8%. And you've got some, statistics that go into play there that you may not have those huge increases every single year, but it's certainly we can work from. Number of Black students enrolled in academic magnet programs increased by 24%. So when we look at the numbers and our measures from last year, we certainly far exceeded those targets. So, I'm not opposed to the 5% necessarily, but we also have to recognize that 24% in one year may not be then followed by another 24% the next year, or a large jump like that. So, that's something.
Clark, I was referring to reducing the achievement gap.
Oh, I thought you had talked about that on the other thing.
I'm on goal 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about participation. I heard that
ma'am.
mentioned.
I
Okay, I'm
did
sorry.
say that, Dr. McNeely, I think.
Also.
Yeah,
I guess for me, go ahead.
So no, I'm sorry. I just thought that's what I'd heard was participation in those. So that's my misunderstanding there. So once the board approves this, I can take this back and work this through with staff again to look at, and I've taken a lot of notes this evening with what, and Jackie's obviously got a lot of good notes that she's taking as well. And we can bring that back in the very near future. I can't promise it, by the end of the week or anything like that, but certainly in the very near future to present that, because at some point you could then bring the finalized version of my goals and objectives to the board for approval, where we could include all of these recommendations.
I do apologize, Madam Chair, Madam Chairman Roy. I'm sorry. I think I did mention participation. I should be saying reducing achievement gap by 5%.
Okay, I misunderstood too. Okay, well, are we all good with keeping it as it is written, and then working on maybe even the next meeting, talking about targets, if that would be doable? Ms. Clark?
Madam Chair, this is David Delaney. If I could weigh in just a minute briefly to
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
For the process by the superintendent's contract as well as policy, the superintendent develops her goals, and the timeline for that would be over the course of the summer, so they are ready to go by the beginning of the upcoming school year. So what the superintendent has tried to do, though, is craft her goals to align them to the the board's strategic priorities. Makes sense for the superintendent to be trying to achieve the strategic priorities of the board. So we're a little bit at step 1 here, and if the board can achieve consensus about their strategic priorities, there is time in June and July to refine the superintendent's goals to implement the strategic priorities of the board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Delaney. We have some time then, if that's all right with everyone. Okay,
The superintendent's,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
the superintendent's homework, if you will, is due by the end of the summer. And it's in conjunction with the board's approval of those. But if the board's able to achieve consensus on their priorities, then the superintendent's able to put that together over the next couple months.
Okay, I think that's clear.
Ms. Roy, I think, and just Mr. Delaney, to clarify, I think part of that August timeline was to allow for receiving the assessment data and then making adjustments if there was a need to there. Now, obviously, we want to have that assessment data. So I don't envision it's going to take until August to make this happen. But obviously, we've got some very big things on our plate right now. And so I want to make sure that we get through, obviously, the end of the school year. But obviously, I've got to have time to meet with staff and to talk through all of these and those targets as well. And if we need to change action steps or whatnot. So I would envision, and towards the end of June, middle of June, that would give us some time to be able to address that.
That's great. All right, so are we all good with that? Any other discussion? Ms. Johnson, how are you feeling about that?
That one's an easy one. It sounds to me like the board reached consensus on keeping it as is.
Okay. All right.
Is the establish a semi-annual report of the strategic plan?
I think that should be something we just say we do.
Okay, so not keep it as a.
No, I don't think. I think
priority. Is that the rest of the board comfortable with that?
Yes.
As long as we keep doing it, I don't think it needs to be listed.
I agree.
Okay.
Like everybody has mentioned, Mr. Hyatt most recently, just because it's not listed doesn't mean we aren't doing it. And if we're all in agreement that it should at least be done twice a year, then I think we can.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I know I hate to bring up anything else, but unlike Dr. Paulson, I did not have my strategic priority list in on time. I was a day late, hopefully not $1 short, but I was a day late. But I did want one thing, and again, it's okay if this isn't listed, but I thought we have learned a lot, and we continue to learn through our experience that we were thrust into this year with the COVID-19 and the distance learning. And I was thinking adding something concerning the development of a distance learning plan based on what we've learned this year, so that we, and I have a strange feeling we're probably doing that sort of as we go, but I think that's important. I think in citizen comment, I think referred to in some way by Ms. Simon, and
sure.
and I'm so again, I don't know what anybody else thinks about that, but I would that's something I think we might want to consider.
Probably going to be a priority. I mean, it's probably going to be a requirement, so might as well make it a priority because it's probably in some form or fashion.
I guess that's what Mrs. Clark has in bullet number 4, goal 1, for establishing the return to school task force.
That's actually a little different than that. Of course, that would be part of it. And we're actually already working towards this, Mr. Hyatt and Dr. McNeely, because distance learning takes 2 approaches. Obviously we have a very robust virtual program, which we can scale out pretty quickly at this point, that we have been working towards doing that. And then you have what we've been doing, which is really pandemic learning over the last 8 weeks. So staff is actually already working on that. Because of course, depending on what return to school looks like, it may be a hybrid approach. It appears that, things are starting to open up, but of course things can change daily, and we know that. But we have already started working on that process for kind of a multi-faceted distance learning approach with current curriculum platforms, and also training our teachers on a more similar curriculum platform, because we found that the different platforms that kind of contributed to some of the stress and some of the feelings of being overwhelmed because of multiple platforms from teachers. So that's something we're actually already working on right now.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. So are we good then on our strategic goals?
Madam Chair, if I could, I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable with the wording pretty simple, develop a distance learning plan to make that a new strategic priority. And also, we haven't quite addressed this yet. I think it may have come up briefly, but I don't know if the board actually reached consensus on formalizing that the renewal of the 1 mil for schools be also a strategic priority for this year.
I think that would be a good goal. And of course, it's one of the ones that'll be accomplished one way or the other by November, early November. So
How many goals do we have now?
Well, that would be
6, so we'll make it 7.
If 3 and 4.
I would, I'm sorry.
If 3 and 4 are combined and we eliminate 6, and then we add renewal of the 1 mil for schools and development of a distance learning plan, if my math is right, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So we'd be back to 6.
That's good.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hyatt.
Wherever it's placed, and I don't disagree that it should be first because of the gravity of it certainly should be first or second. We definitely need to have the 1 mil, and that's been just really a defining difference in our district and many others that surround us. And when we look at the arts and media, technology, all of these things. So I hope we'll make that somewhere high on the list.
I have a question, please, Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
As you list the priorities here, so I didn't realize, I thought all of these were important. I didn't know by the number that we have them in order that's the top. I didn't realize that. Is that what you mean?
No.
I hope not, because I cannot agree with my colleagues to say when you've got children who are failing. So as long as you're saying that's not the way that you have it outlined, I'm all good with it.
That was certainly never.
You can put number 4, number 6, as far as I'm concerned, as long as we do it. I didn't think you were listing, I didn't think you were ranking these in order.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hyatt.
I totally accept Dr. McNeely's point, and I will withdraw any need to rank anything.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we all agree that they're all very important and doesn't matter the order that they're in. So are we good then with 6 goals? All right, I don't hear any objections. So let's go on then to action item, agenda item 5, which is consent item 10 on the addition of the Alachua County Public Schools Autism Spectrum Disorder Endorsement Add-on. Dr. McNeely had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've got so many papers in front of me now, I'm mixed up, but I had a question on page 25 of that document. And I was just wondering, first of all, how many of our teachers are working out of field K-12 because of this autism spectrum disorder endorsement?
Dr. McNeely, this is Bessie Crashoni.
Hi, Bessie.
So currently we actually don't have any teachers who are considered out of field in that certification, because to be considered out of field, all of the teachers assigned to them would have to have autism, right? So currently we don't have any because of the support services we provide in thinking about the least restrictive environment. we try to stay away from self-contained.
Okay, thank you. So my next question would be, because it's listed here in the language, in some cases, districts may offer stipends. Are we planning to do that for our instructional staff who will sign on for this program?
So the plan, the way that we're able to offer this service to teachers is through Fiddlers, which is the Florida Diagnostic and Learning Resources System,
Yes.
and which is that discretionary project of the Florida Department of Education. And they're offering the training free of charge to districts, but districts would have to pay for their own stipend. So the plan would be to follow suit as we do with our reading endorsement courses in ESOL and not provide a stipend to teachers as it's online coursework.
Okay, I just wanted to know, sometimes that will incentivize people to take advantage of some things, but if that's not a choice for the district, so be it. I thought I had one more question. So if Fiddlers is doing it, there is no cost associated with the program for the teachers that would be taking this?
No, ma'am, there's no cost to the teachers or our district.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. We, I guess, need a reading of the recommendation and then a motion and a second.
Motion, I'll give you a motion.
Brian, is that you, or do you want me to make how do you want to do it?
If you're ready, go ahead. I'm not quite there, so.
Sure, since it was part of consent, probably that would work. So Madam Chair, I recommend that the school board approve the addition of the Alachua County Public Schools Autism Spectrum Disorder Endorsement Add-on Program as presented.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Ms. Certain has moved, seconded by whom?
Dr. McNeely motioned.
Dr. McNeely. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. All right, it's been moved by and seconded. Is there any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes 5-0. So now we are going on to citizen input. And Mr. Moore, you have some emails, I think.
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one email. We have two people who have submitted speaker request forms downstairs, and we have had, and they've been here from the very beginning. We also have had one very patient phone caller who has been on from the beginning.
Wow.
And so I think I can wait on reading an email since we have people live and waiting.
Sure,
I was gonna
absolutely.
call bring the phone person in so that Jackie can probably collect her thoughts downstairs and bring in the first speaker down there after the phone caller. And so our phone caller is Donald Fields. And I'm going to unmute him here. And again, he's been on hold for 2 hours, so he might need to catch up to us. Mr. Fields?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so thank you for waiting so long. I know you've been on hold a long time. You have 3 minutes now with citizen input to provide to the board.
My wife would like to speak as well if there's time at the end.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay. No, me first.
But you may need to turn down whatever you're watching the meeting on because there's a delay. It's catching up.
Yes, right. I can mute it with a quick button. Just give me the say so, or when you're ready.
We're ready for you now. So if you can mute it now, then you're on.
Okay. It's done.
Very good. You're on with the board right now.
Hello, this is Don Field speaking, and I wanted to talk to the purchasing of the school property out of Jonestown. And I'm very concerned about this issue, and I would like to have it called back for reconsideration. I endorse the idea of that the Gainesville Sun that is even saying that we should pull back on this and do some more careful study on it. And but in particular, I think, and it's my opinion, that the important part of Mr. Hyatt's special to the Sun is not so much what was highlighted in bold, but actually what the title of this law that I voted, this surtax that I voted for, because I thought it was actually going to be earmarked for half-cent sales surtax to improve school facilities, not buy new land and create a new school. That seems to be a different earmark to me, a different color of money. And I've talked to several of my friends since I heard of this, and all of them say the same thing that I do, which is that they voted for it for improvement of schools, not a far out some plan. It's not that I'm against the plan of preparing for schools. It's just that the use of the proper color of money is the term that I'm familiar with. And that's my comment. I mean, otherwise it just seems like every time I go to the polls, I'm somehow making a deal with the devil, where I've got to read all the fine print to make sure that the money goes where I'd like it to, where I think it's going to go. Much like I voted for the felon getting their vote back after they paid their debt to society, only to find that they have to pay it to the courts as well. It just seems to be non-transparent, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Fields.
And Mr. Fields, did you say your wife also wanted to make a comment?
Yes.
And it might be easier just to go ahead and let her do that now, so you don't have to call back in.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate this. This is Christina Fields. My comment is I'm concerned about the students that are at your lower end, probably the 1s and 2s testing. I am a former teacher, and I dealt with that population, and I'm very familiar with the problems that these kids face. I'm going to address my main issue to the COVID and how the school board chose to have Wi-Fi put in areas around the city. I decided to go around and talk to the bus drivers, asking what kind of feedback they were getting from the parents and from the kids. The only ones that seemed to be enthusiastic were the bus drivers, and certainly they were, conversely, they were disappointed that in fact the children were not utilizing this opportunity. I'm mostly concerned that this will set the students back, that in fact that without Wi-Fi access and without the learning, that they are in fact going to be set back, and the schools, I think it's going to have to be addressed financially, that these kids are going to need extra funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fields. Mr. Moore, we have someone else?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have had 2 people waiting since the beginning of the meeting. So if Ms. Johnson is ready, I don't know which of the 2 put in first.
Yes, Mr. Moore, that would be Pam Korthowski.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's Pam Korthowski from the Alachua County Council of PTAs. It's good to see everyone. It's a little odd being in the boardroom by myself here. So Madam Chair, board members, superintendent, it was 2 years ago, I stood up here receiving the torch from our past president, Conlon Banco, And on June 1st, I will be passing the torch on to our newly elected president, Mary Benedict. It's been an honor and privilege to serve as the Alachua County Council president for the past 2 years and represent its 3,118 members here. I wanted to first thank my amazing committee, Mary Benedict, Erin Scarborough, Laura Bergman, Megan Hendricks, Sarah Nasroy, Rick McNeil, Conlon Banco, Arlene Stewart, Becky Lancer, and Nicole Reno and Andrea Camacho, who's actually a senior, graduating this year from GHS. I also want to thank our local PTAs for their support and all of their hard work and support they give our kids and our teachers every day. We were able to accomplish our goals of supporting both the half-cent sales tax and the Children's Trust, which are two initiatives that our families and children needed in this county. We focused on mental health funding, awareness and resources, school safety, and strengthening our communication with our ESC families, along with vaping education as well. We did this by forming strong partnerships with Fiddlers, FND, NAMI, Alachua County Crisis Center, Partnership for Strong Families, Tobacco Free Alachua, and our local churches and libraries. We hosted a summit on children's mental health with Dr. Scott Poland and talked about building resilience in our LGBT youth, partnering with Equality Florida and Ian Silvestrum. We held numerous ESC workshops throughout our county, from helping preschoolers to our kids that are transitioning out of high school. We learned about equity and were blessed to receive a national grant to host a STEM night for our county that we held at the MLK Center, geared towards our underserved community. We have held multiple trainings for our community, talking about school report cards, what they mean, and better advocating for our children, to what school board members' role is, and to continue to support our local unit PTAs to make them stronger. We tackled the issues that are relevant and affecting our children right now, from school safety to vaping. We marched with our teachers in Tallahassee and started the Red for Ed campaign to raise awareness of the awareness of the teacher shortage. Unfortunately, our year was cut a little short due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we were able to host the Duval Metcalf Carnival before schools closed this year, which was a nice opportunity for those students, I guess, to transition into distance learning. We started up the Alachua County resource closure page for families, teachers, and the community to share resources, ask questions, and help us get through these uncertain times. We could not have done any of this without the support from our superintendent, Ms. Clark, Ms. Jones, and all of our principals. Thank you for opening your doors for us and hosting our workshops, our meetings, and our trainings. Thank you to Ms. Kedwell, Jennifer Taylor, and your team at the Manning Center for all your support and collaboration. Thank you to Mr. White and your facilities team for your tireless efforts over the past 4 years. Thank you to Mr. Rella, Mr. Purvis, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Freeman, Ms. Wise, Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Stark, and Ms. Fortner. I
Ms.
appreciate
Karthowski, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it is 3 minutes, so please.
30 seconds. Ms. Freeman, I just want to say thank you to the district for partnering with us and helping to educate our local units. The mission of PTAs everywhere is to make every child a potential reality by engaging, empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. Mary and her board will continue this mission and everything that they do and continue to ask, how do we help? As I said, PTA is bigger than any one person, and it's a group of people collaborating and working together that make a difference. I just want to thank you. I'm just blessed to be a part of this wonderful association, and I thank you to all the agencies and this wonderful group for helping us make a difference in our community, a difference for our kids. Thank you for all your support. Sorry for going over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Korofsky, and honestly, for everything that you and all the PTAs have done.
Madam Chair, I was going to suggest while we get the next speaker, I can go to the next caller.
Okay.
And that is going to be, sorry, it is Carl Smith again. And let me bring him off of mute. Pastor Smith?
Yes, I'm right here.
Okay, you are on for 3 minutes. And if you can mute the background noise.
Okay, that's you.
And,
So I'm pushing you further over.
Okay, whenever you're ready, the board is with you now.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I was going to suggest while we get the next speaker, I can go to the next caller. And that is going to be, no, you still need to mute the background, Pastor Smith.
Is Carl Smith again.
Yeah, I'm muted, so it's just,
And let me bring him off of mute.
No, you're on with the board right now. We're listening to the YouTube
yes,
feed.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, you are on for 3 minutes. And if you can hear the background noise.
Okay. Thank you very
no-
much, Madam
okay.
Chair, members of the
sir.
board, Madam Superintendent.
Board is with you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Just while we get the next speaker, I can go to the next caller.
If you can turn off whatever you're watching, it's coming in about a 20-second delay.
Okay, is that better?
Much
All right,
better.
so I'm live
Yes, now it's good. Now you're good to go.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Madam Superintendent. There are 2 items that I need your help on. One is that we established a half-cent oversight committee, and I asked the board to honor that process to ensure that planned expenditures are properly reviewed prior to the board approval. This speaks specifically to the most recent decision on land purchase. That was not presented to the half-cent oversight committee. I've spoken with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for operations about this. So I'm hoping that we can do a better job of making certain that we are using this committee in an effective way.
Is he still talking?
Reverend Smith, that was your
yes,
first
ma'am. I'm listening.
turn.
Right, I'm going to the next item now.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, sir. We're listening.
All right, the second item is that our children and parents have gone through a very challenging time with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're yet to know the real impacts of distance and virtual learning. I'm hearing some positive stories, but I'm also hearing some horror stories about a single mother working from home with 3 children, all on computers, and all of the impacts of that. And I think it's important that we develop a customized learning plan for each of our students to ensure that they're ready for the next school year so that they're not frustrated. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I temporarily muted you. I was trying to figure out where the echo was coming from.
Okay. I was just saying thank you to Reverend Smith, that's all.
And then I believe, Ms. Johnson, we have one more speaker.
Yes, we do. That would be Rick McNeil.
Good evening, Superintendent, School Board Chair, board members, and the general public that are viewing. I am Rick McNeil, a retired teacher. After retiring, I came to Gainesville and quickly got involved in the education of my grandchildren by volunteering. I've been involved in the PTA at J.J. Finley and with the Alachua County Council of PTAs, the ACC PTA. As such, I was asked to serve on the School Planning Advisory Committee, the SPAC. So once again, I address you about my role on SPAC. After the discussion of the SPAC recommended property purchase for a future school last meeting, I know a lot of half-truths and opinions have been floated in the paper and social media. To my surprise this weekend, a school board member turned to Facebook and made some pretty insulting comments and innuendos attacking these aspects of my volunteering in Alachua Public Schools. Since the SPAC was referenced, I felt it necessary to bring forward some important truths. One, I was treasurer and on the board of ACC PTA and was part of the leadership team that reactivated it to support all schools and all PTAs. I am disappointed that a sitting school board member doesn't know PTA and its incredible work supporting and helping schools, advocating for kids, volunteering, tutoring, and providing resources and encouragement that school budgets can't support. Each year, our PTAs contribute in this county nearly $500,000 for kids for schools. Pam just spoke about what more than 3,000 members and leaders accomplished this year alone. Number two, as part of the leadership team of Accepta and the PTA, we visited every school and saw the conditions that needed improvement. We saw the hope the half-cent sales tax offered, and the ballot language was quite clear to include the purchase of property for expansion or building new schools for the future. Number three, as spelled out in the interlocal agreement, every municipality was sent a letter requesting them to appoint 2 citizens to represent them on a school planning advisory committee. Accepta was also asked to send 2 volunteers because it was the only countywide volunteer program representing every school.
Mr. McNeil, if you could, I'm sorry, it's been 3 minutes. If you could wrap it up, please.
The purpose of SPAC was to consider the need for new schools, changing the capacity of any school, and looking at properties where schools could be located. SPAC met, and after a couple of meetings led by a staff member, I was voted to serve as chairperson. We served with city, county government, staff people, university leaders from UF Santa Fe College, local citizens selected by cities and local leaders. A school board member even attended a couple of meetings among other visitors. While the work of the SPAC was intense, meeting every Friday for 9 months, we published on the school board website agendas and notes from every meeting. They're still there. I also presented information and updates to 2 school board meetings and 2 district advisory committee meetings, all open to and attended by the public and the Gainesville Sun. Finally, the comments on Facebook directed toward me and Conlon Banco were insulting and political. We have spent 2 years ago with the SPAC findings and recommendations and published it. Last year, as plans were moving along.
Mr. McNeil, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but you really need to wrap it up, please.
With appraisals and demolition, architects, and that sort of thing. And in February of this year, the superintendent notified school board members that she was recommending the purchase of the property. The link to the school planning advisory committee is on the communications and community page tab, under the links tab on the school board website. I encourage people to look at that and see all of the people involved and what was done by the SPAC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for all of your hard work and your comments. Thank you.
Madam
All
Chair,
right.
as I mentioned earlier, I do have one email.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to do my level best without turning it into a Federal Express commercial to get this done in 3 minutes.
All right.
Take your time. The previous speaker just did.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
so
true.
this is from, and I'm going to mispronounce her name, and I apologize for that, Maria Escunce. That's my hope. And this says, Dear Alachua County School Board, I hope this finds you well and facing this difficult time the best you can with the help of your family and loved ones. I would like to take the opportunity to share with you some thoughts I have about reopening schools next fall. As a parent of a 3rd grade student, I'm concerned about the online education. My daughter is probably doing fine academically because I'm able to help her. However, as UF and businesses are reopening, I will be back at work in the fall, and I, as well as probably the majority of the Alachua school parents, will need to send our kids to school. I understand that there are parents that have the choice to keep their kids at home, and Florida already has alternatives for those kids. However, for the kids who with out-of-home working parents, our only option is to send the kids to school. I'm also aware that we will need to take several actions to do this safely, and I will be happy to brainstorm ideas with the school board and parents. This is indeed the effort of an entire community, and we will all need to work together on this. I'm hoping that the school districts will give each school flexibility, as each school is a different community. The best plans for reopening are going to be those coming from within our community and each school. Some measurements that have been taken by some other schools and in some other settings are: 1, all parents measure kids' temperature before leaving their homes. 2, kids wash their hands before leaving their houses and again once they get in their classrooms. 3, there are automatic alcohol dispenser at school entrance and in each classroom. 4, mats with disinfectant are to be placed at school entrances for kids to disinfect the bottom of their shoes. 5, kids eat at their classrooms or outside. 6, before leaving school, each kid wipe out their desks and chairs. 7, ultraviolet light could be added to major HVAC systems to sanitize the AC system. 8, deep cleaning of school every 3 weeks with WashGuard electrostatic surface cleaner, which kills 99% of germs for up to 21 days. 9, safety for teachers needs to be considered. At college level, some instructors are using shields. We need to reopen schools. Kids are missing the social interactions and physical activities that they have at school, which have been a very positive impact in their overall health. I know that our schools have many Spanish-speaking parents, so if you need any help with translation, you can count on me. I am fully English-Spanish bilingual. I look forward to hearing from you and how I can help in the challenge of how to safely reopen our schools. Thank you for all the amazing work you and your team have been doing at Alachua County. And she beat the deadline by adding a little addendum that I think I can still do, saying that she would like to add that schools are needed to play an important role in educating our communities on how to naturally improve our immune system, healthy diet, exercising, stress management, etc. It is a key aspect to reopen safely. Self-nutritional and emotional care should also be talked about, such as washing hands. Thank you for the opportunity to submit my thoughts. I hope they help.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Maria. And I'm not going to try the last name, but thank you.
I apologize to her profusely if I got that horribly wrong.
Okay.
And that was the last email, and there are no other callers at this time.
Okay, so we then are at board member superintendent requests before adjournment. Anyone like to make a request? I am not hearing people.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was still muted. I don't have a, well, I do, it is a request. I'm
okay.
requesting that we have a workshop, hopefully as soon as possible. Just like my colleagues, Mother's Day weekend, or you dads, I'm sure that you were inundated just like I was inundated with emails. I made mention of this before, but guess what? I'm still receiving emails because of the purchase that we agreed to in a 3-2 vote. So I am asking that we try to build community trust. You may not think that the trust has been broken, but I'm afraid, I'm totally afraid, especially from this side of town where I live. And you're gonna need these votes as well. We have the 1 mil coming up. And because of that precious tax that we are going to be asking folk to help us again, we are going to have to straighten out some things. So here is my request. I'm hoping that you remember on February the 4th, at that particular board meeting, I asked Mr. Paul White, our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, to please come back before the purchase of whatever and give us some more insight. I asked that. Look it up. I've pulled that meeting more than once, and I know what I said, and it's clearly there. So I'm asking that we come up with a workshop, maybe Mr. White, facilities, curriculum. I don't know who the superintendent would ask to help with that. But in order for us to build trust, we need to have a workshop that will help us figure out the communication, what happened, where did we go wrong? I don't know. And you may not say we went wrong anywhere, but it needs to be spoken. We need to have this. And I don't know what my colleagues are thinking, but the people, even in COVID-19, I'm tired of being on my phone. I really am, about the amount of money that we have spent. So I'm hoping that to rebuild much trust that we need to build, I hope that we can examine what we did during this purchase and whatever we can do for the future to correct anything that may have gone awry. We need to do that. We didn't get to have the meeting, but the special meeting, but now we can have a workshop where we can speak, where anyone in the district who might need to explain, citizens can speak. But I'm telling you, folk, if you don't feel it, you haven't been out in a long time. You need to know that we must regain the trust of citizens. All citizens, not just who agree with the vote of 3, but all citizens. It may take forever, Attorney Delaney and more, to have a civil workshop. But I'm here to tell you that if we don't do that, ladies and gentlemen, we are in trouble. I want to get the trust back in track so that when we get ready to go to the polls to vote for the 1 mil, that there is not going to be a problem. Everyone sitting up here, well, in our homes, but everyone who represents us as an elected official, we have to agree how important the 1 mil is. And if you don't think that we are cutting ourselves in pieces all over this community, take a second look. So I'm asking Superintendent Clark that a workshop would be established so that we can work out the kinks, the flaws, whatever. So whenever we get ready to move to future purchases and financial acquisitions, that we will not run into the same situations that we have run in these past couple of weeks. It hurts my heart to know that all of us are being impacted in one way or the other. It's not just me. It's not just Dr. Paulson or Mrs. Roy, Mrs. Certain or Mr. Hyatt or Mrs. Clark, but it's all of us. And so until we rebuild the trust and outline it in some manner that I'm saying it to you, we're in trouble.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. We understand your point completely. Thank you.
I hope so, Madam Chair.
Yes, yes, ma'am, we do.
I had a request, Madam Chair.
Yes, I don't know who was first. Was it Ms.?
You can go first, that's fine.
Okay, Dr. Paulson.
Yeah, I just wanted to state something too, and I looked at those workshops February 4th and February 18th, and I've been doing I've been trying to reply to these emails. I've had a lot of people calling me, not me calling them too, and and I'm learning a lot more about what happened. So I'm going to read this. On May 5th, we voted to purchase property on Farnsworth Road, a property consisting of 37.2 acres. This has been a purchase that started with the SPAC, School Board Advisory Committee, spending 1 year looking at over 1,000 properties suitable for a school site. Their number one property was the property we just purchased. When this property once again became available, all 5 board members, and I looked at that tape very closely, all 5 board members at a February, I thought it was a workshop, gave our staff direction to negotiate to purchase this for this property. The superintendent then kept us informed of the process, because yes, we did ask to do that, through an email on March the 30th, and another email on April the 27th, where I think she said they were ready to purchase it. This property has been divided into 128 parcels, so it can be used to build homes. Also, this property is in the urban service area, while in the future, if we can find land, it will be outside the service area and be much more expensive still. Another important factor is that there has been 3 appraisals at or above $3.5 million. Our agent, number 2, did not represent the seller in this transaction. 3, there are still, and this is important because people's talking about appraisals, there are still 2 offers of $3.5 million on the table. And I had this checked out before I came to this meeting, but that's something I've been, I hear that all the time, that it's so overpriced. And if we don't purchase the property, the seller still has 2 more buyers, and I'm sure we will soon see a 128 home subdivision. Then we have to find a place to put them. Now, I really appreciate my fellow board members. I really do. Rob, your article in the newspaper was excellent. Eileen, for your leadership. Dr. McNeely and Ms. Surden, whether you realize it or not, I do appreciate you telling me how you feel. And I appreciate tonight, Dr. McNeely, your statements. I also appreciate your points of view, because that's how you get better, when you listen to other people's points of view. I always made that example when I was a football coach. I told them to argue with me in front of my coaches so they realized they could talk to me and give me their points of view. I hope this explains how I came to the vote the way I did. I'm still, after all this, I have been obsessed with this ever since, even before May 5th, but since May 5th, because I thought that was important. I'm trying to write back to emails to these people that are writing, especially the ones that didn't write just the form letter. I am firm in my belief that this purchase right now is still the right thing for our children and our community. But again, I appreciate everybody's input. I'm trying to answer. By the time we have that workshop, I hope I have answered every one of those emails, because I appreciate that. That's how you get better, is when you can have conversations, even if you don't agree with the other person. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Balson. Thank you. Ms. Surden, I think you wanted to speak as well.
Thank you. I haven't shared my opinions with anybody or any of the board members on that. So, but I can appreciate what Dr. Paulson just said and what was said by Mr. Rick McNeil. My request, since we were at board member request, was that we bring the impact fees back for a vote. I'm not sure if we'll be ready for the first meeting in June, but for sure by the second meeting in June. I was looking here to make sure that wasn't canceled, because I saw a lot of 2 things that were canceled. It looks like the June 16th meeting would be the second one. Second meeting in June.
June 16th, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that was my request. That's what I wanted to say.
Madam Chair, if I would, I can have Brian can respond to that. We were actually just having this discussion within the last 24 hours about this. So if Mr. Moore, if you could provide a brief update.
Yes, hi. I finally managed to get a chance to find an hour where I was not being bombarded with other stuff. And I did talk to Gene Bowles again, making sure that I have everything I need, particularly the examples from Santa Rosa County, which recently did this. So there are several steps we need to take, and there's options that we can do. And I'm thinking right off the top of my head, and this doesn't necessarily delay the timeline that Ms. Certain was just talking about, but maybe at our June workshop, including this, you're already going to have to listen to me talk about policies for part of that. But there are a couple ways that we can proceed with the impact fees. One of them is what Santa Rosa did was simply kind of adopt an ordinance for the county. So the county is the one that adopts the impact fee ordinance to apply it countywide. And then we also have to have collection agreements with all the cities, or whichever cities in Alachua County collect the taxes themselves. I'm assuming it's Gainesville. I don't know if any of the other ones do. But so those are all steps we have to take, and those can happen simultaneously. But another option, in order to really kind of spell out what the board intends to accomplish here, is to have a resolution go with it. You know, the whereas, therefore, where you specifically delineate the east-west line that Mr. Bowles brought the last time, and also perhaps address, and we really haven't had a chance to do this in any detail, the potential for bringing in language for low-cost housing. I think Mr. Bowles talked about it, and we did talk about it somewhat back at the original workshop. But I don't know that we really got a good idea from the board on how they want to pursue that. I believe Mr. Bowles told us that it is language that can be used, but it is almost impossible to actually make it happen. But certainly we can look at what Santa Rosa did in terms of trying to help some low-cost housing not get caught up in this. And so I would like to kind of have a more free-form discussion with the board at a workshop to just make sure, even if it's just, yes, let's do a resolution. Hopefully I can have a draft ready by then. I can bring in the Alachua County ordinance that we would likely send to them, but it also, you all need to talk about what sort of amount of to the 100% that you want to do. Do you want to go 100%, 75%, 50%? That all kind of needs to be worked out. And I think I'd rather get your input on that. And I'm sure Mrs. Clark, not to speak for her, but would like that before she brings you a recommendation that might not be in sync with what you want. So I think that's still possible to look at the 18th for a vote, but we would also then, or not the 18th, I'm sorry, the 16th for a vote, but kind of getting final language at least discussed at the workshop so that what we bring you on the 16th is ready to go and not so uncertain.
Okay.
Can I answer him? This is Dr. Paulson.
Yes.
I was wondering, I handed out something to everybody about the impact fees, and I redid it, and it's in the office. And the place that Gene Bowles used for his example was 75%. And he says that's the vast majority of people in the state of Florida use 75%. So we can look at that. The other thing is, and I think Mrs. Certain was probably, I thought we were in agreement on this, is I thought we could have more than one impact fee area. But Mr. Bowles came back and divided the county in half, where you don't have impact fees being charged east of 441 or I guess 13.
No, it's Main Street.
Main Street, thank you, Ms. Roy. And then the other side, the impact fees would be charged. And that, again, like I said, it was 75%. I went through about everybody's impact fees, how many they have impact fees, do they have a sales tax, do they have a millage? And and all divided by which ones have 1, 2, or 3. And so I think that's interesting. But maybe I was thinking and not listening, Brian, but I think I would still like to see something about dividing our district, our county into 2 districts like that.
I'm sorry, Dr. President. I think absolutely. I think all 5 of you were very clear that you much preferred what Mr. Bowles brought back to us
that's
at
what
the
I
last
wanted
meeting
him at the beginning.
than what we had the first time around. So that would be, again, I don't get to make this call, but my assumption, and I know what that word means, is that we would be bringing you an impact fee proposal that does go down Main Street. The really just the big issues for you to decide are whether to have a resolution where, using your own language as opposed to careful ordinance language, you talk about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And as part of that resolution, adopt the ordinance you'd like the county to adopt. Don't have to do it that way. Santa Rosa just adopted the ordinance and sent it to the county. You don't, I mean,
Again,
they
I
didn't
think
adopt the ordinance, they adopted language that they sent to the county.
We might
Um,
be encouraging, hopefully we can encourage building in the east side of the county.
Right, so all of that can be put in, and so I just think that it'd be an easier discussion at a workshop on the 3rd, where I can bring in a resolution, an ordinance, that tries to spell all that out. Santa Rosa did not divide it, so I'll have to look at their language to craft it properly. And I need to talk with the county, the city, and any of the smaller outlying cities that collect the taxes themselves. Again, I can do all of that. We can do that as we go, but that's another process. We can't just surprise them with it. They need to be ready to implement it and start collecting it. So
thank you.
I did have one other thing, Ms. Roy.
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Certain.
And in relation to the SPAC, it was my understanding, and I'm just going to state this since it's been brought up. My understanding when the SPAC was formed, it was to locate a site for an elementary school, and all the parcels in the county were evaluated. And when the SPAC brought the list back to the board for them to approve, they said this 37-acre parcel was the first choice, but it was sold already. So I think the board approved the site that was next to Oakmont for the new elementary school. And so there wasn't, I thought that was the dealings of the SPAC at that point right there. I didn't realize they were going to be citing property or identifying property that was way out in the beginning. But in their minutes, I did go back and read some of their minutes, and I think it was like May the 18th or somewhere along that line, 2019. They were interested in it, and they also considered price. And when they were interested in the lot, it was $1.9 million something, 9 and change, $1,958,000, something like that. So it's not, to balk at the price of it now and to say that there are 3 appraisals now on February 4th. I went back and listened to the tape also. Looks like I heard Mr. White distinctly say there were 2 appraisals done in the February 4th workshop. So I won't prolong the time. It's 9:30 now, it's well spent. And I'll speak on that more a little bit later. Dr. McNeely has called for a workshop, and I'll share with my colleagues and all things that seem like anomalies to me in that workshop.
Ms. Roy, one more thing. The reason there's 3 is because the Emerson appraisal was not included at that time. There are 3.
Madam Chair.
What did he say? I couldn't hear Dr.
Emerson appraisal, the Emerson appraisal. That was the 3rd appraisal.
But wasn't the Emerson appraisal made at the time that the SPAC was interested in buying it? Or close to that time?
Last year, that was the 3rd appraisal. That's why I was saying, and that was 3.55 million, their appraisal. And the reason that property has been gone up is because of the plots that they divided 128, and that made the price go up. There's also property down that's not anywhere near by the what do you call it, the grocery store there, Publix, and that sold for I don't know exactly how long ago it was.
4.4 million for
70,000 an acre.
Yeah, for 60 acres though. For 60 acres for 4.4 million.
I'm just telling you.
23 more acres.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hyatt.
I want to thank everybody tonight for their contributions and a really good discussion. But I don't have a request that wouldn't be redundant, but I did want to say to the superintendent and her team, bravo on coming up with a very imaginative solution for graduation, because all 5 of us care deeply about these young people and want them to have the best experience they can have under these strange circumstances. And my concern, besides the whole social distancing, was that it be timely. And this is timely. So it's not like you're coming back 3 months later and trying to reenact something. So thank you, and thank your team for getting that done. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Well, I think everyone has spoken, so
No,
I'd
Ms.
like to
Moore,
just,
I have something else.
oh,
So
you do?
if you
Okay.
want me to speak before you have the last word?
Go ahead.
Okay, this has to do with a conversation I had with Mrs. Clark as far as a property acquisition for the city of Gainesville on the east side of town, where our transportation department and some other buildings over there. I just want you to know that I'm working with Commissioner Simmons, City Manager Lee Feldman, and I would never want it to be known that I knew something and the rest of you did not. Mr. White was a part of that meeting, and so they would like to negotiate with us, the school board, to swap some land, meaning that moving the transportation department from where it's located and maybe finding a piece of land somewhere else. What they are hoping is to have the area from, all of you know where the old tackle box used to be, and now it's a floral area. That is sort of like the gateway to Eastside Gainesville. And so our bus transportation department and other buildings out there, it's such an eyesore. And what they would like to establish would be housing, retail, and other enhancements for Eastside Gainesville. Because I live in Eastside, Alachua County, the east side of Gainesville, I felt it was imperative that I work with that group. But I would never want you all not to know that this has come to the table. I've shared it with Superintendent Clark, and there will be subsequent other meetings about it. But I wanted you to know, and I'm sure at some point in time, Mr. White will share more. We're looking at a markability plan, and we would, I guess, have to share that cost with the city and the school board. But I think it really lends itself to knowing how dismal East Gainesville looks as it is, but to have an opportunity to enhance it and moving that eyesore away would be an absolute wonderful opportunity for that portion of Gainesville, East Side. So I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. That is really interesting. You know, so many thoughts in my head, but I just want to say, first of all, I so appreciate everyone's heartfelt remarks tonight. And, you know, the tough decision on strategic plan was just amazing. I'm so glad we got through that and we reached some consensus on how those should be worded. And I appreciate everyone's comments there. To address Dr. McNeely's remarks about how we have to build trust with the community, I agree. I think part of the reason was some of the language that a number of email writers included in their email was misleading and people got the wrong idea. For example, a number of them talked about faulty appraisals. We have no reason to believe that the appraisals are faulty. We're dealing with professionals who are independent. And as I think it was Mr. Hyatt pointed out, those people that we bought the property from, or our agent, excuse me, were not working for the seller. And so I don't see any reason, and it certainly doesn't help the school board to be impugning the reputation of people who are doing the appraisals. So faulty appraisals was one thing I thought was misleading, and a number of people use that phrase in emails to me. And the other thing that really must be corrected is that we were speculating on buying this property. Speculating means that you're buying property with the intent of selling it and making a profit, which was not the intent of the board at all. But it introduces an element of risk if you think that we are speculating on this property. So I just wanted to say that some of the language, I'm an English teacher, some of the language, gave people the wrong idea. And these people are angry. I agree with Dr. McNeely. They have lost trust. But hopefully we can straighten that out. It does need a discussion. I want to thank everyone, and Dr. Paulson's remarks were excellent too. I think all of us appreciate both sides of this issue. We do, because it is a tough time to make a decision. My thinking on this was that the business of the school district continues. And another thing, some people were misunderstanding about this. People said we were neglecting the East Side, and even the editorial had that wrong in the Sun this past weekend. We are not ignoring the East Side, and I think, as Mr. Hyatt has pointed out, more than 99% of the money raised is going to existing schools, many of them on the East Side, and of course the first ones to be tackled are on the East Side. So I hope no one thinks that we are neglecting the needs of the East Side. We know those schools are ancient and falling apart in some ways, and really, really need to be torn down and rebuilt, which is what we're doing. So those are a few of my thoughts on why people have lost trust, and we need to build trust again. That's some of my thoughts on that. So one thing I wanted to point out that CDS Family and Behavioral Health Services is presenting a summer achievement camp this summer, 2 one-week sessions of camp at no cost, fun, interactive, therapeutic counseling program. Students will learn positive behavior, career readiness skills, and self-healing through art, play, counseling, and expressive therapies. This is totally free. And 2 5-week, I said 1 week. No, it's 2 5-week sessions. One is from June 1st through July 3rd, and the second one is July 6th through August 7th. So I hope some people, if they're interested, who may be listening, will pass the word along. This is a wonderful opportunity, and it is free. So and I would like to end the meeting on a positive note with a celebration of Mr. Rella and his and the superintendent and all the people in finance for negotiating such an amazing bond bill for us. And as he said, that's going to provide more money to put into the schools and to help children. So if there's nothing else that is to be said, I would like to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.